I should have known my fairy tale wedding would end in disaster when my father-in-law grabbed the microphone during our reception. The crystal chandeliers of the grand ballroom suddenly felt more like spotlights, and 200 pairs of eyes turned to watch my world implode. My name is Isabella, and less than an hour ago, I had become Mrs. Patterson, in what should have been the happiest moment of my life. Now I stood frozen beside my new husband, Dawson, as his father Corey's voice boomed through the speakers. "I've watched my son make many mistakes in his life," he began, swirling his champagne glass. "But this is by far his biggest one yet." The room fell silent. My mother Maria half rose from her seat, but I subtly shook my head. This was my battle to fight. "A girl from the wrong side of the tracks," Corey continued, his words slicing through the air like daggers, "who somehow managed to convince my son she was worthy of the Patterson name. Tell me, Isabella, how does a secretary's daughter think she can possibly fit into our world?" I felt Dawson tense beside me but remained silent. His hand, which had been holding mine under the table, slowly withdrew. The gesture hurt more than his father's words ever could. "Corey," Prudence, my mother-in-law, hissed from their table, "that's enough." But he wasn't finished. "I've built this family's legacy from the ground up. Everything we have, the company, our reputation, our standing in society, I've earned it. And now you think you can just waltz in and—" "Actually," I interrupted, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "I believe I can." I stood up, smoothing my white designer gown. "And I think you might want to check your phone, Corey. There's something you should see." His phone buzzed right on cue. I watched as he pulled it out, his face turning from smug superiority to confusion, then shock. This is impossible," he stammered, looking up at me. "The Morrison deal? How did you know about it?" I smiled, though inside I was trembling. "Or do you mean how did I make it happen? Because yes, that merger you've been chasing for months, the one that's going to save your company's fourth quarter, you're welcome." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My best friend Peyton shot me a subtle thumbs up from her table. Even Elliot, Dawson's usually smug cousin, looked impressed. "You're bluffing," Corey sputtered, but his hands were shaking now. "Am I?" I took a step forward. "Should we call James Morrison right now? I'm sure he'd love to tell you about our lunch last week. Or maybe we should discuss how I orchestrated the entire negotiation through a shell company while working as a mere secretary in your acquisitions department." Dawson finally found his voice. "Isabella, what are you talking about?" I turned to my husband, seeing the confusion in his eyes. "I'm talking about proving my worth, darling, something your father seems to think I need to do." Corey's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is preposterous. Security. Escort her." "I wouldn't," I cut him off, "unless you want the Morrison deal to disappear as quickly as it materialized. You see, nothing's been signed yet. One word from me." The threat hung in the air. Prudence was now gripping Corey's arm, whispering furiously in his ear. The ballroom had erupted into hushed conversations, phones were being pulled out, and I could practically hear the society gossip machine whirring to life. "You've underestimated me, Corey," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "And that was your first mistake. But don't worry, I'm just getting started." I turned to leave, pausing only to address our guests. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate our special day. Unfortunately, it seems the party's over." As I walked toward the exit, head held high, I heard Dawson call after me, "Isabella, wait!" But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Because if I did, everyone would see the tears threatening to spill from my eyes. They'd see how much it hurt that my husband had sat there in silence while his father tried to humiliate me. They'd see that beneath my confident exterior, I was screaming. Instead, I pushed through the ornate doors, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Peyton appeared beside me, already holding my clutch and car keys. "That," she whispered, "was the most badass thing I've ever seen." I managed a small smile. "Trust me, it's only the beginning. They want to see if I'm worthy of the Patterson name? Fine. I'll show them exactly who they're dealing with." As we walked out into the warm evening air, I could still hear the chaos erupting behind us. My wedding day might have been ruined, but I had something better now: leverage. And I intended to use every bit of it. You did what? Peyton nearly spilled her coffee across my kitchen counter the next morning. I'd finally told her the full story behind the Morrison deal, and her eyes were as wide as saucers. Keep your voice down, I whispered, though we were alone in my penthouse apartment. Old habits die hard. Yes, I orchestrated the entire merger through a series of shell companies. I've been planning this for months. But how? I mean, you were just a secretary? I raised an eyebrow. That's exactly why it worked. Nobody pays attention to the secretary taking notes in the corner. Nobody questions when she stays late to organize files. And nobody notices when she's quietly building relationships with every key player in the industry. My phone buzzed again, the 15th call from Dawson since last night. I silenced it. You're not going to talk to him? Peyton asked. Not until he decides whose side he's on. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city skyline. Besides, I'm expecting a more important call. Right on cue, my business line rang. I put it on speaker. Isabella speaking. This is James Morrison. His gravelly voice filled the room. I just had a very interesting conversation with Corey Patterson. He seems to think I've been negotiating with you. That's correct, James, though technically you've been negotiating with Aurora Ventures. I smiled. My company. There was a pause. Well, I'll be damned. You're telling me that brilliant restructuring proposal came from you, not some fancy consulting firm? Every word. And the profit projections I showed you? They're conservative. I can do even better. You've got balls, kid. I like that. He chuckled. But why reveal yourself now? Let's just say my father-in-law needed a wake-up call. The question is, are you still in? Depends. Are you still offering that 30% cost reduction in the first year? Make it 35, I countered. But I want a seat on the board. Peyton's jaw dropped. She mouthed "holy shit" at me. Done, James said without hesitation. Send over the paperwork. And Isabella? Give Corey hell for me. That smug bastard's had it coming for years. After hanging up, I turned to Peyton. And that's how you turn the tables. I can't believe you've been planning this since... She was interrupted by loud knocking at my door. Isabella, open up! It was Dawson. I nodded to Peyton, who squeezed my hand before slipping out through the service entrance, our pre-arranged exit strategy. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Dawson looked terrible. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tie loose. Where have you been? I've been calling all night. Oh, now you want to talk? I stepped aside to let him in. Funny, you were pretty quiet at the wedding. What was I supposed to do? He's my father. And I'm your wife. The words exploded out of me. Or did you forget that part when you let him humiliate me in front of everyone we know? I didn't know. He ran his hands through his hair. About Morrison. About Aurora Ventures. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? Or would you have run straight to Daddy with the information? His silence was answer enough. The board meeting is in 2 hours, I said, checking my watch. Your father's probably already there, trying to damage control. You should go. Isabella, please, we can fix this. Fix what exactly? The fact that your father thinks I'm trash? Or the fact that you didn't defend me? I walked to my closet and pulled out a designer suit. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get ready. I have my own meeting to attend. What meeting? The one where I signed the Morrison deal. I smiled sweetly. Oh, and Dawson. You might want to warn your father. James is giving me a board seat. He staggered back like I'd slapped him. You can't do this. I already have. The question is, what are you going to do about it? As if on cue, his phone rang. Looking at the screen, he hesitated. Go ahead, I said. Answer it. We both know it's your father. He took the call, turning away from me. Yes, father. I'm with her now. No, she won't. Yes, I understand, but I walked into my bedroom to change, leaving him to his stammered explanations. In the mirror, I saw a woman I barely recognized, stronger, fiercer, ready for war. My mother's words echoed in my head. Never let them see you sweat, baby, even if you're breaking inside. When I emerged, Dawson was gone. In his place was a text message. "Please don't do this, you'll destroy everything." I typed back, "No, darling, I'm just getting started." Grabbing my briefcase, I headed for the door. The Morrison contract was inside, along with enough documentation to prove every backroom deal and questionable transaction the Patterson empire had made in the last 5 years. Corey wanted to play dirty. Fine. But he was about to learn that this secretary's daughter had been taking notes on a lot more than just meeting minutes. The Patterson corporate boardroom fell silent as I walked in, heels clicking against the polished marble floor. Corey sat at the head of the table, face red with barely contained rage. Prudence stood by the window, arms crossed, and there was Elliot, Dawson's cousin, watching me with newfound interest. "You're not welcome here," Corey spat. I placed my briefcase on the table. "Actually, I am." James Morrison's proxy letter. I slid the document across the gleaming surface. "He's given me full authority to negotiate on his behalf." Elliot picked up the letter, eyebrows rising. "It's legitimate." "This is absurd." Prudence stepped forward. "You can't possibly think—" "Think what?" I interrupted. "That a secretary could be smart enough to orchestrate a multi-million-dollar merger? Or that a woman from the wrong side of the tracks could outmaneuver the great Corey?" The door opened and Dawson walked in, looking between his father and me. He took a seat halfway between us, still playing both sides. "Let's talk numbers," I said, opening my laptop. "The Morrison merger will save this company $20 million in the first quarter alone. Without it, you're looking at a 15% drop in stock value by end of month." "Those numbers are confidential," Corey growled. "How did you access them?" I smiled. Amazing what people leave lying around their desks when they think the cleaning crew is coming through. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. "Stay strong, baby. Show them what you're made of." Elliot leaned forward. "Perhaps we should listen to what Isabella has to say." "You too?" Corey turned on him. "She's trying to destroy this family." "No," I corrected. "I'm trying to save your company. The fact that it hurts your pride is just a bonus." Dawson finally spoke. "Isabella, please, can we discuss this privately? Like we discussed things at the wedding?" I kept my eyes on Corey. "The Morrison deal closes today, with or without Patterson Corp's involvement. Your choice." "You're bluffing," Prudence said. I pulled out my phone, dialed, and put it on speaker. "James, you're on with the Patterson board." "Isabella, just reviewing the final paperwork now. Brilliant stuff, as usual. When can we announce?" Corey's face went from red to purple. "James, whatever she's promised you—" "Save it, Corey," James cut in. "I've wanted to work with someone like Isabella for years, someone who sees the big picture, someone who isn't afraid to take risks. Unlike some people I know." The implications hung heavy in the air. I watched as the board members exchanged glances. 3 o'clock, I said. "That's your deadline. Accept the deal with me on the board, or I take Morrison's business elsewhere." I stood up, gathering my things. "Oh, and Corey, you might want to check your email. There's some interesting information about certain offshore accounts that the SEC might find fascinating." Elliot's eyes widened. Prudence gasped. Dawson looked sick. "You wouldn't dare," Corey whispered. "Try me." I headed for the door, then paused. "By the way, I'm having dinner with my mother tonight. You remember her, the secretary you looked down on for 20 years? She sends her regards." In the hallway, Elliot caught up with me. "That was impressive." "Save it," I said. "I know you're just looking for an angle." He grinned. "Can't blame a guy for trying. But seriously, if you're looking for allies, I know where all the bodies are buried. Metaphorically speaking, of course. I'll think about it." My phone rang. Peyton. "Girl, you need to see this. Turn on CNBC." I pulled out my tablet, pulling up the financial news. The headline made me smile. "Morrison Industries in play. Mystery negotiator threatens Patterson dynasty." "They're calling you the corporate Cinderella," Peyton laughed. "How does it feel?" "Like revenge," I admitted. "But also lonely." I looked back at the boardroom, where Dawson was now in heated discussion with his father. He had his chance to choose. He made his decision. "And what about your decision? Are you really ready to blow up your marriage for this?" Before I could answer, another text came through from Dawson. Meet me at our spot. Please. We need to talk. Our spot. The rooftop garden where he proposed, where I'd first believed in fairy tales. I have to go, I told Peyton. The next move is about to be made. Be careful, she warned. Wounded animals are the most dangerous, and right now, you've got a whole pack of them cornered. I stepped into the elevator, pressing the button for the roof. In the mirrored walls, I checked my reflection. Not a hair out of place, not a sign of weakness. Good, because this next conversation would determine everything. My future, my marriage, and just how far I was willing to go to prove my worth. The elevator doors opened to the garden, and there he was, standing by the roses. My husband. My opponent. My biggest weakness. Game on. The rooftop garden felt different now. The roses that once seemed romantic looked like splashes of blood against the green foliage. Dawson stood with his back to the city skyline, his tie loosened, looking more lost than I'd ever seen him. Remember when you proposed here? I asked, breaking the silence. You said we'd take on the world together. I meant it, he stepped forward. I still do. Really? Because from where I'm standing, you chose your father's side the moment things got difficult. It's not that simple, Isabella. He ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit I used to find endearing. The company, the family name, everything my father built, would be nothing without this merger, I cut in. Your father's been running the company into the ground for years. Those offshore accounts I mentioned, they're not just tax havens. He's been embezzling. Dawson's face went pale. How do you know this? Like I said, nobody watches the secretary. I moved to the edge of the garden, looking down at the city below. Every late-night meeting, every suspicious transfer, every shredded document, I saw it all. I just waited for the right moment. So this whole time, our relationship was real. I turned to face him. God help me, it was real. I fell in love with you despite my plans, not because of them. His phone buzzed. We both knew who it was. He wants me to convince you to back down, Dawson admitted. Says he'll make you a vice president, give you a seat on the executive committee. I laughed. He's still trying to buy me off? After everything? What do you want, Isabella? Really? I want what I earned. Recognition, respect, and yes, power. I stepped closer to him. But most of all, I wanted you to stand by me, to be the man I thought I married. The rooftop door burst open. Elliot strode out, slightly out of breath. Sorry to interrupt the marital drama, but you need to see this. He thrust his tablet at me. The headline made my blood run cold. Anonymous source questions. Morrison deal ethics. SEC investigation. Possible. My father, Dawson said quietly. He's trying to tank the deal, Elliot explained. Claims there's evidence of insider trading. My phone started ringing. James Morrison. James, I can explain. Save it, he barked. My lawyers are already getting calls. What the hell is going on, Isabella? It's a desperate play, I said, keeping my voice steady. Corey's trying to force my hand. Give me an hour. You've got 30 minutes. After that, I'm taking the deal to their competitors. The line went dead. Elliot whistled low. Well, cousin, he said to Dawson, looks like it's time to pick a side, because this is about to get ugly. Dawson looked between us, torment clear on his face. There has to be another way. There is, I said. Tell your father to back down. Show him the evidence I have. End this now. He'll go to prison. He should have thought of that before he started stealing from his own company. My phone buzzed again. A text from Peyton. Your mother's here. Corey sent people to her house. The world tilted. Your father, I said to Dawson, my voice shaking with rage, just sent men to threaten my mother. He wouldn't. Check your phone. I'm sure he told you all about it. Dawson pulled out his phone, scrolled through messages. The colour drained from his face. I didn't know, he whispered. Isabella, I swear. Save it. I was already heading for the door. Elliot, release the documents to the SEC. All of them. That'll destroy the company, Dawson protested. I turned back one last time. No, it'll destroy your father. The company will survive under new leadership. I looked at Elliot. I assume you're ready to step up? Elliot smiled. Been ready for years. Just needed the right partner. Isabella, please. Dawson reached for me. Don't do this. I pulled away. You had your chance to stop this. Now it's too late. As I reached the door, his voice stopped me. I love you. I love you too, I said without turning around. But love isn't enough anymore. Your father just made this war personal. The elevator ride down felt like descending into battle. I texted Peyton, get my mother somewhere safe. Use the contingency plan. Another text came through, this time from James Morrison. 20 minutes left, make it count. I straightened my spine, checked my reflection in the elevator's mirrored walls. My mother taught me to always face my enemies looking my best. As the doors opened to the lobby, I saw Corey waiting with his security team. Bad move, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Going after my mother, now I'm going to burn it all down. The chess pieces were in place. The final game was about to begin, and this time I wasn't playing to win. I was playing to destroy. Your mother's fine, Corey said, his security team flanking him in the lobby. Consider it a warning shot. Wrong move. I pulled out my phone, dialed a number on speaker. Go ahead, I told the person on the other end. A familiar voice filled the lobby. This is James Morrison. In light of recent developments, I'm announcing that Morrison Industries will be pursuing an exclusive partnership with Aurora Ventures. Effectively. Immediately. Corey's face contorted. You wouldn't dare. Still playing? I pressed another button on my phone. Every screen in the lobby lit up with breaking news alerts. The company's stock was already plummeting. You're destroying everything, he roared, stepping forward. No, I corrected him, standing my ground. You did that yourself. Every illegal transaction, every backroom deal, every threat, it's all documented. And now it's in the hands of the SEC. The elevator dinged. Dawson and Elliot stepped out, followed by several board members. Father, Dawson said, his voice tight. It's over. The board has called an emergency session. A vote of no confidence, Elliot added, looking far too pleased. Effective immediately. Security guards that had been backing Corey suddenly shifted, moving to stand beside Elliot instead. I saw the moment Corey realized he'd lost control. You planned this, he snarled at me. All of it. Actually, you did. I stepped closer. The moment you decided to threaten my mother, you gave me everything I needed. The board might have overlooked financial misconduct, but witness intimidation. That's a step too far. My phone buzzed. Peyton. Your mom's safe at the lake house. She says to give them hell. Isabella. Prudence emerged from another elevator, looking shaken. The family reputation will survive, Elliot cut in. Under new management, the board has already approved my temporary appointment as CEO, with Isabella as executive director. You're working together. Dawson looked between us, betrayal written across his face. Someone had to clean up this mess, Elliot shrugged. And Isabella here has proven she knows how to get things done. The lobby was filling with security personnel and executives. Phones were ringing everywhere. Through the glass doors, I could see news vans pulling up. Mr. Patterson, a stern-looking woman in a dark suit approached. I'm with the Securities and Exchange Commission. We need you to come with us. Corey turned to Dawson. Son, you can't let this happen. But Dawson stepped back, shaking his head. You threatened her mother, her family. What did you expect? Dawson, I said softly. I never wanted it to end like this. Didn't you? He met my eyes. Was any of it real? All of it. That's what makes this so hard. The SEC agents were leading Corey away. He turned back one last time. You'll regret this. All of you. No, I replied. I'll be too busy saving your company to regret anything. As the chaos unfolded, Elliot pulled me aside. The press will want statements. We need to control the narrative. Already handled. I showed him my phone. James Morrison is holding a press conference in 10 minutes, announcing our partnership and the leadership transition. The stock will stabilize by market close. You really do think of everything. Had to. It was the only way to survive in this world. Prudence approached us, her usual composure cracking. What happens now? Now, I said. We rebuild. Properly this time. No shortcuts, no schemes, no threats. And my son. She glanced at Dawson, who stood alone by the windows watching the media circus outside. That's up to him. I felt my throat tighten. Some things can't be fixed with business deals. My phone buzzed again. A message from my mother. Remember what I taught you, baby? Sometimes winning costs more than losing. I looked around the lobby, at the empire I'd helped topple, at the man I loved but couldn't trust, at the future I'd fought so hard to secure. Victory tasted different than I'd imagined. Isabella, Dawson called out. He walked over, stopping just out of reach. I need to know something. If I had stood up to him at the wedding, would any of this have happened? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. No, I admitted. But you didn't. And here we are. Here we are, he echoed. Elliot cleared his throat. Press conference in 5. We should go. I nodded, turning away from Dawson, but his voice stopped me one last time. I'll be watching, he said. Show them what you can do. I straightened my shoulders, checked my reflection in the lobby windows. The cameras were waiting, the world was watching, and the real work was just beginning. Time to face the music, Elliot said. I smiled. No, time to change the tune. Together we pushed through the lobby doors into a storm of camera flashes. The next chapter was about to begin, and this time, I was writing it on my own terms. 3 weeks after Corey's arrest, I sat in my new office, staring at divorce papers. They'd arrived by courier that morning, Dawson's signature already in place. My coffee had gone cold as I watched the sun climb higher over the city skyline. A knock at the door broke my trance. Come in, Elliot entered, waving a tablet. Have you seen this? I didn't need to look. The headlines had been screaming all morning. Corey Patterson speaks out, the truth behind my downfall. He's claiming I seduced Dawson as part of an elaborate corporate espionage scheme, I said, keeping my voice steady. That I worked with competitors to orchestrate his downfall. That I'm a gold digger who just increased company profits by 40% in 3 weeks, Elliot interrupted. Nobody's buying his story. The society pages are. Since when do you care about... He spotted the papers on my desk. Dawson finally did it. Can't blame him. I destroyed his family. His father destroyed his family. You just exposed the rot. Elliot sat down across from me. But that's not why I'm here. We have a problem. My phone buzzed. Peyton. Turn on the news now. I grabbed the remote, flicking on the office TV. My blood ran cold. Breaking news, the anchor announced. Anonymous sources claim new executive director Isabella Patterson engaged in insider trading during the Morrison merger. The SEC has launched an investigation. That's impossible, I said. Every transaction was clean. I made sure... It's Corey, Elliot said. He's trying to drag you down with him. Another knock. This time it was James Morrison himself, looking grim. Tell me you have nothing to do with this, he demanded. James, you know me. Everything was by the book. Then explain this. He tossed a file on my desk. Inside were transaction records I'd never seen before, all bearing my digital signature. These are forged, I said, but my hands were shaking. I never... Prove it, James said. Fast, because right now, my board is pushing to dissolve our partnership. My phone rang, my mother. Baby, there are reporters at my house. They're asking about money transfers to offshore accounts in my name. The room started spinning. Elliot grabbed my arm, steadying me. He's thought of everything, I whispered. He's trying to make it look like you're exactly what he always said you were, Elliot finished. A con artist who married her way into power. James paced the office. I've got shareholders breathing down my neck. If we can't clear this up by end of day... Give me 3 hours, I cut in. I need to make a call. They left me alone. With trembling fingers, I dialed a number I'd hoped never to use. Prudence, I need your help. Silence on the line. Then, why should I help you? Because your husband isn't just coming after me. These forgeries, these fake accounts, they implicate Dawson too. Check his emails from this morning. I heard typing, then a sharp intake of breath. That bastard. He's willing to destroy his own son to get revenge. Help me stop him. Meet me at the house in an hour. Come alone. I grabbed my purse, but Elliot was waiting outside my office. You're not seriously going? It's the only way. It's a trap, he insisted. Let me come with you. No, but be ready with the press release we prepared. If I'm not back in 2 hours. Isabella. He grabbed my hand. Be careful. Corey might be in custody, but he's still dangerous. So am I. The drive to the Patterson mansion felt surreal. This was where I'd first dreamed of belonging, where I'd fallen in love with Dawson, where everything had started to unravel. Prudence opened the door before I could knock. In here. She led me to Corey's study. Everything was exactly as he'd left it, down to the half-empty whiskey glass on his desk. What am I looking for? Not what, she said. Who? The study door closed behind me. I spun around to find Dawson standing there. I'm sorry, he said softly, but we need to talk. The divorce papers weren't enough? This isn't about us. He moved to his father's computer, typed in a password. It's about stopping him before he destroys everything. Again. The screen lit up with emails, documents, a trail of breadcrumbs leading to the truth. He planned this failsafe months ago, Dawson explained. Set up accounts, forged signatures, created a paper trail. He knew someday someone would try to take him down. Why are you showing me this? Because, he met my eyes, despite everything, I still love you, and I won't let him destroy you too. My phone buzzed. Elliot, SEC agents are heading to the mansion. Get out now. But I didn't move, because on Corey's computer screen, I finally saw what I needed, the key to my salvation, and possibly to saving what mattered most. Dawson, I said, I need one more favor. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Time was running out, but for the first time in weeks, I felt hope. The game wasn't over yet. The annual shareholders' gala was in full swing when I walked into the grand ballroom, the same one where my wedding had imploded just weeks ago. This time I wasn't wearing white. My black dress was armor, my red lipstick war paint. Cutting it close, Elliot muttered, appearing beside me. The SEC is here. Good. I checked my phone. A message from Dawson. It's done. Files uploaded. The room hushed as James Morrison took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, in light of recent allegations, the board has decided to hear the truth. I cut in, striding toward the podium. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Camera phones raised. Isabella, James warned, don't do anything. Rash? I smiled, plugging my laptop into the presentation system. Like exposing how Corey Patterson orchestrated his own downfall. The massive screens behind the stage lit up with emails, documents, surveillance footage. The audience gasped. 3 months ago, I announced, Corey created an elaborate scheme to frame me if I ever threatened his position. But he made one mistake. He used his own computer. Security footage played, showing Corey in his office late at night, creating the very documents he'd used to accuse me. The timestamps prove these forgeries were created months before the Morrison merger was even conceived, I continued. And the digital signatures, traced back to software purchased on Corey's personal credit card. James stepped forward, examining the evidence. These are genuine? Verified by 3 independent forensic analysts, Elliot confirmed, joining us on stage. The reports have already been sent to the SEC. The federal agents in the crowd were already on their phones, faces grim. But wait, I said. There's more. Another click, another document. This time, the crowd actually gasped. This is a recording of Corey ordering the fabrication of evidence against his own son, I explained. He was willing to destroy Dawson's career, his reputation, everything, just to get revenge on me. Prudence stood up from her table. You're lying. No, Mother, Dawson's voice rang out. He emerged from the crowd holding a USB drive. She's telling the truth. I found the original files myself. The room erupted in chaos. Reporters were shouting questions. Board members huddled in corners, whispering furiously. James, I turned to Morrison. Still want to dissolve our partnership?" He laughed, shaking his head. "Kid, you're either the most brilliant or the craziest person I've ever met." "Why not both?" The SEC agents were approaching, but not for me. They headed straight for the back of the room, where Corey's lawyer was trying to slip out unnoticed. "Oh," I called after them, "you'll want to check his offshore accounts too. He's been helping Corey hide assets for years." Elliot raised an eyebrow. "How did you—" "No, please. I was a secretary, remember? I saw every document that crossed his desk." Dawson approached the stage, looking up at me. "You did it." "We did it," I corrected. "Thank you for trusting me one last time." "Isabella," he started, but I shook my head. "Don't. This doesn't change anything between us. Some bridges can't be rebuilt." My phone buzzed. "Peyton, girl, you're trending. Chuck Corporate Cinderella Strikes is #1. The crowd was still in upheaval when James took the microphone. "In light of these revelations, the Morrison-Patterson merger will proceed as planned, under the current leadership." Applause broke out. I saw Elliot grinning, already working the room like the CEO he was born to be. "One more thing," I said, taking the mic. "To everyone who doubted whether a secretary could run a company, our stock price is up 60% since I took over. Any questions?" Silence. Then more applause, louder this time. As I stepped down from the stage, Prudence blocked my path. "You've won," she said quietly. "Are you happy now?" I looked at her, really looked at her. Behind the designer dress and perfect makeup, I saw something I'd never noticed before. Fear. Fear of change, of losing control, of becoming irrelevant. "This was never about winning," I told her. "It was about truth. About earning my place, not having it handed to me or taken away on someone else's whim." "And Dawson will always be the greatest casualty of his father's pride." I glanced at him across the room, our eyes meeting briefly. "Take care of him." I headed for the exit, but Dawson caught up to me by the doors. "The divorce papers," he said. "I'll have them withdrawn." "No." I touched his cheek one last time. "Let them stand. We both need a clean slate." "Isabella." "Goodbye, Dawson." Outside, the night air was cool on my skin. Peyton waited by my car, grinning. "Ready to celebrate?" I looked back at the ballroom, at the life I'd fought for and won, at the love I'd had to sacrifice along the way. "Actually," I said, "I think I'm ready to go home. Mom's making her famous lasagna." Because in the end, that's what all this was about. Not revenge, not power, but proving that a secretary's daughter could change the world without losing herself in the process. And I'd done exactly that. The morning sun streamed through my office windows as I signed the last document finalizing Corey's complete removal from the company. Elliot sat across from me, feet propped on my desk like he'd been doing it for years. "Stock hit another record high," he announced, scrolling through his phone. "The press is calling us the dream team of Wall Street." "Funny how things work out," I said, adding the paper to the done pile. My phone lit up, Peyton sending me a link to yet another article. "Corporate Cinderella, from Secretary to Savior." Below it was a message. "Your mum's crying happy tears again." A knock at the door made us both look up. James Morrison stood there, trademark grin on his face. "Hope I'm not interrupting the victory lap." "James," I stood to greet him. "What brings you downtown?" "Can't a man check on his best investment?" He dropped into a chair. "Though I did hear something interesting this morning. Seems Prudence is selling the mansion." Elliot sat up straight. "Moving in with Dawson?" "Actually," James said, "she's opening a women's business mentorship center. Said something about making amends for years of looking down on the wrong people." I couldn't help but smile. People can surprise you. "Speaking of surprises," Elliot pulled out an envelope. "The board unanimously approved your proposal. The Employee Education Fund is officially launched. With full scholarships for support staff who want to advance their careers," I added. "No more talented people stuck making coffee just because they can't afford night school." James nodded approvingly. "From secretary to CEO to fairy godmother. You've come a long way." "Not far enough," I said, pulling up a presentation on my laptop. "We need to talk about expanding the Morrison merger into European markets." "Always working," Elliot groaned. "Don't you ever rest?" Rest is for people who've achieved all their goals. I winked. I'm just getting started. Another knock. This time it was Dawson, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in months. Sorry to interrupt, he said. Just dropping off the last of the divorce papers. An awkward silence fell. Elliot and James exchanged glances. We should check on that thing, Elliot said, standing. The very important thing, James agreed, following him out. Alone with Dawson, I felt the familiar ache in my chest, fainter now but still there. You look good, he said. Happy. I am. I gestured to the chair across from me. How's the new venture? The tech startup's taking off. Turns out there's life outside the family business. He sat down. Mom asked about you. I heard about the mentorship center. Tell her. Tell her I'm proud of her. Tell her yourself. She'd love to have you speak at the opening. I raised an eyebrow. Really? People change, Isabella. Sometimes it just takes a massive wake-up call. He smiled sadly. I should know. My phone buzzed. My mother. Dinner tonight? Made your favorite dessert. You know? Dawson said, watching me text back. I never told you this, but that day at our wedding, when my father started his speech, for a split second I almost stood up, almost told him to stop. Why didn't you? Because I was afraid. Of him, of change, of losing everything I thought I needed. He stood up. But you weren't afraid. You showed me what real courage looks like. Dawson, let me finish. I'm not here to win you back. We both know too much has happened. But I wanted you to know. You didn't just save the company. You saved all of us. From ourselves. I felt tears threatening but held them back. Thank you. He headed for the door, then turned back. Oh, and Isabella, Dad asked about you. How is he? In prison. Teaching business classes to other inmates. Says he's finally learning what real leadership means. He shrugged. Like I said, people change. After he left, I walked to the windows, looking out at the city. My city now, in many ways. Elliot poked his head in. All clear? All clear. Good, because we have that meeting with the European investors in 10 minutes. I grabbed my tablet, straightened my jacket. Then let's not keep them waiting. Hey, he caught my arm. You okay? I thought about everything that had brought me here. The humiliation, the revenge, the victory, the loss. The price of power and the value of truth. You know what? I smiled. I really am. My phone buzzed one last time. Peyton had sent a photo of my mother's famous chocolate cake with the caption, "Ready when you are, boss lady." And I was ready. Ready to keep building, growing, changing the world one boardroom at a time. Ready to help others rise like I had. Ready to write the next chapter. Not as the corporate Cinderella, not as Dawson's ex-wife, not as Corey's nemesis, but simply as Isabella, the woman who had finally, completely become herself. Let's go, I told Elliot. We've got work to do. Because that's what powerful women do. We keep moving forward one step at a time, bringing others with us as we climb. And I was just getting started.
My name is Ruby, and I came into this world as an apparent afterthought, 12 years after my eldest sister Sarah and 10 years after Emma. By the time I was forming my first coherent memories, they were already deep into their teenage years, more interested in boys and makeup than playing with their baby sister. Our house in suburban Minnesota was always filled with the echoes of my parents' pride in their older daughters. Sarah got straight A's again, they'd beam at dinner. Emma made the cheerleading squad, they'd announce to anyone who'd listen. I'd sit there, pushing peas around my plate, feeling like a shadow in my own home. I remember the day Sarah brought home her first boyfriend at 16. I was just 4, peeking through the banister rails as this tall boy with spiky hair nervously shook hands with our dad. Emma wasn't far behind, starting to date at 15. They were both so beautiful, so confident, so everything I wasn't yet. Ruby, finish your homework, Mom would say, barely glancing my way as she helped Sarah pick out prom dresses or discussed college applications with Emma. I learned early on to be self-sufficient, to do my own thing, to not need the attention that seemed permanently focused on my sister's achievements. "Did you hear? Mom burst into the kitchen one morning when I was 7. Sarah got accepted to Northwestern." The news was followed by celebratory pancakes, while I sat in my usual spot, invisible as always. Emma left for college 2 years later, and suddenly, I was alone in a house that felt both too empty and too full of their lingering presence. Their rooms became shrines to their past lives, trophies, photos, and memories preserved exactly as they'd left them. Meanwhile, I carved out my own space, learned to find comfort in solitude, and tried not to mind when every conversation somehow circled back to my amazing older sisters. The real turning point came when I was 15. Sarah, now married and living across town, gave birth to her first child, a boy named Tyler. I still remember the day she brought him home from the hospital, everyone cooing and crying, my parents practically floating with joy at becoming grandparents. "You'll be such a wonderful aunt," Mom said, squeezing my shoulder. Looking back now, I realize that was the moment everything started to shift, though I couldn't have known it then. At first, I was genuinely excited about being an aunt. Tyler was adorable, and I loved making silly faces at him while Sarah and Mom chatted over coffee. But that dynamic shifted faster than I could have imagined. It started with what seemed like an innocent request one Saturday morning. "Ruby, could you watch Tyler for a couple hours? I really need to do some shopping," Sarah asked, already putting her purse over her shoulder. Before I could even respond, she'd placed Tyler in my arms and was heading for the door. "Thanks, sis. You're the best." That became the new normal. Every weekend, Sarah would show up at our parents' house, hand over Tyler, and disappear for hours. Sometimes it was shopping, other times it was lunch with friends or a spa day, always under the guise of needing a break from motherhood. "It's not fair," I complained to Mom one day after Sarah had been gone for 5 hours. "I had plans to meet Jenny at the mall today." Mom barely looked up from her magazine. "Family helps family, Ruby. Your sister needs this time to herself. You'll understand when you're a mother." I was 16 when Emma announced she was pregnant. "It's a girl," she squealed at the family dinner. While everyone celebrated, I felt a knot forming in my stomach. Sure enough, when little Sophie arrived, history repeated itself with a vengeance. Now my weekends were a circus of managing a 3-year-old Tyler and baby Sophie. Try helping a toddler build block towers while trying to keep a crying infant calm. It's not as fun as it sounds. And homework? Forget about it until they were both napping, if they ever napped at the same time. "Jason asked me to the movies tonight," I told Dad one Saturday, while bouncing Sophie on my hip and watching Tyler color on our coffee table instead of his coloring book. "Well, you should have thought about that before agreeing to watch the kids," he replied. I never agreed. "Nobody ever asks me." The frustration in my voice made Sophie start crying. "Lower your voice, you're upsetting the baby," Mom scolded from the kitchen. "And stop being selfish. Your sisters need this support." I started spending my free time in the school library, researching colleges. Not just any colleges, ones far away from home. I threw myself into studying, knowing good grades were my ticket out. Every A on my report card was one step closer to freedom. When my acceptance letter from Berkeley arrived, including a partial scholarship, I felt like I could finally breathe. But my family had other plans. "The community college here has a great business program," Sarah suggested during what they called a family council, but I called an intervention. "You could live at home and save money. And help with the kids," Emma added brightly, as if that was a selling point. I looked around our living room at their expectant faces, Mom, Dad, Sarah, Emma, and Grandma Rose, who'd been unusually quiet throughout the discussion. Actually, Grandma Rose's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "I think Berkeley is perfect for Ruby." Everyone turned to stare at her. "That program is exactly what she needs for her future career. And your grandfather's education fund will help cover what the scholarship doesn't." I could have hugged her right then. The family council ended with my parents and sisters shooting disappointed looks my way, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt like I could see my future clearly, And it didn't involve being everyone's free babysitter. College life was everything I'd dreamed of and more. My dorm room became my sanctuary, my classmates became real friends, and for the first time in years, my weekends were my own. No crying babies, no sticky-fingered toddlers, just me and my choices. But you can't completely escape family obligations, especially during the holidays. I tried to visit as little as possible, but Thanksgiving and Christmas were non-negotiable. Mom would call weeks in advance, her voice thick with expectation. "Everyone's asking about you, Ruby. The kids miss their aunt." The first Christmas break after I started college, I walked into absolute chaos. Sarah now had 2 boys, Tyler and his new baby brother Luke, while Emma had managed to add a boy named Max to her family alongside Sophie. But that wasn't even the half of it. "Ruby," Aunt Janet called out the moment I walked through the door, immediately steering her twin 5-year-olds in my direction. "The kids have been asking about you." "No, they haven't," I thought. "They barely know who I am." But before I could protest, Cousin Rachel's 7-year-old daughter attached herself to my leg, followed closely by Cousin Mike's 9-year-old son and 6-year-old daughter. "Ruby, honey," Mom called from the kitchen, barely visible behind a mountain of dishes, "why don't you take the kids upstairs to your room? I'll bring up some snacks later." And just like that, I was corralling 8 children up the stairs, feeling more like a sheepdog than a college student. My old bedroom became a war zone, toys everywhere, juice spills on my childhood bedspread, crayon marks appearing mysteriously on the walls. Hours passed. My stomach growled as delicious smells wafted up from downstairs, where the adults were enjoying their peaceful holiday meal. When Mom finally appeared with a plate of kid-friendly snacks, she barely made eye contact. By the time I managed to sneak downstairs at 8 o'clock, after coordinating with various parents to collect their exhausted children, the dining room was empty except for dirty dishes and picked-over serving platters. "Oh, Ruby," Emma said, already putting on her coat. "Max was an angel for you, right? We've got to run, it's past his bedtime." Sarah followed suit, gathering her boys, while chatting with Mom about New Year's plans. Aunt Janet was helping her twins into their snow boots, while cousins Rachel and Mike were carrying their sleeping children to their cars. Not a single thank you. Not one person asked if I'd eaten. Not even a backwards glance as they all filed out, leaving me standing in the wreckage of Christmas dinner. "Ruby, be a dear and help me with these dishes," Mom called from the kitchen, as if I hadn't just spent the entire day doing her a massive favor. I looked at the mountain of dirty plates and serving dishes, evidence of a holiday meal I never got to enjoy. The message from Mom arrived during finals week, just as I was finishing my last paper for the semester. My phone buzzed with her usual pre-holiday update, but this one made my blood run cold. "Sarah and Emma are coming with the kids," it read cheerfully. "Plus Janet and her twins, Rachel's girls, Mike's kids, and exciting news. Sarah's sister-in-law Lisa is joining us with her 3. It'll be such a wonderful Christmas with all the little ones." I did the math in my head, 12 kids. 12. I sat there in the library, staring at my phone until the screen went dark, then lit it up again to make sure I'd read it right. The message stayed the same, but something inside me finally changed. 2 years of college had given me perspective. I'd watched my roommate Kate go home for holidays and return with stories of actual family time, board games, movie nights, proper Christmas dinners. My friend Jessica's biggest complaint about going home was having to share the TV remote with her siblings. Meanwhile, I'd spent every holiday of my adult life as an unpaid nanny service. I didn't reply to Mom's message. Instead, I packed my bag for Christmas break with an unusual sense of calm. For the first time, I wasn't dreading the holidays because I was going home with a plan. The days leading up to Christmas were deceptively normal. I helped Mom in the kitchen, breathing in the familiar sense of her signature dishes, pot roast, honey-glazed ham, and her famous apple pie. I decorated the Christmas tree, carefully hanging the ornaments I'd made in elementary school alongside the fancy glass balls Mom reserved for the front of the tree. Christmas Day arrived with a flurry of activity. Cars began pulling into our driveway one after another, each bringing more chaos than the last. Sarah arrived first with her boys, now 5 and 3, followed closely by Emma with Sophie and Max. Lisa, Sarah's sister-in-law, showed up with her 3 kids, all under 7. The rest of the relatives poured in after them, each family adding more children to the growing crowd. I watched from the corner of the living room as the noise level rose steadily. Sarah made her way toward me, her youngest balanced on her hip while the older one tugged at her sleeve. "Ruby," she called out with that familiar tone, the one that meant she was about to pass off her parental duties. "The boys have been so excited to see you. They can't wait to play with their favorite aunt." She was already nudging them in my direction, the same way she had 100 times before. But this time was different. This time, I stood my ground and looked her straight in the eye. "No," I said, my voice steady, despite my racing heart. "I'm not watching the kids today. I'm here to enjoy Christmas like everyone else." The room didn't exactly fall silent, there were too many children for that, but I could feel the ripple of shock move through the adults. Sarah's mouth dropped open. Mom froze in the doorway with a plate of cookies. Dad looked up from his newspaper with raised eyebrows. "But who's going to watch all the kids?" Emma's panicked voice carried across the living room as I turned toward the stairs. I glanced back just long enough to see Mom's helpless shrug and the bewildered looks on everyone's faces. The sight almost made me laugh, they looked like someone had just told them Christmas was cancelled. My feet carried me up the familiar stairs, past the family photos marking my sister's many achievements, and into my childhood bedroom. The soft click of the door closing behind me felt like the period at the end of a very long sentence. I flopped onto my bed, the same twin bed I'd had since middle school, and let out a long breath. Downstairs, I could hear the muffled sounds of chaos, adult voices rising and falling, children crying, the occasional thump of something being dropped or thrown. Can you believe her? So selfish. In my day. The fragments of conversation that filtered up through the floor made me smile. Let them talk. Let them finally face the reality of watching their own children. My phone buzzed with a message from Kate. "Did you do it? Did you finally stand up to them?" "Operation Freedom is in progress," I typed back. "Currently hiding in my room while they figure out how to parent their own kids." A knock on my door interrupted my texting. "Ruby?" Mom's voice was trying for concerned but landed somewhere between annoyed and desperate. "The children are asking for you." I didn't move from my comfortable position on the bed. "I'm busy, Mom." Her sigh was audible through the door, followed by the sound of her footsteps retreating down the hallway. I returned to my phone, joining a group chat with my college friends who were providing running commentary on their own family Christmas dramas. Jessica's uncle was drunk again, Mike's grandma was asking when he'd find a nice girl, Kate's brother had brought home a surprise girlfriend. 2 hours passed like this, in peaceful rebellion. My phone buzzed constantly with messages of support from friends who'd heard me complain about holiday babysitting duty for years. The chaos downstairs eventually settled into a different rhythm, one that didn't include my participation. When I finally descended the stairs for dinner, you'd have thought I'd risen from the dead, judging by everyone's expressions. Aunt Janet actually dropped her fork. Cousin Rachel's mouth hung open mid-sentence. I scanned the dining room, noting Emma's conspicuous absence. Through the doorway to the living room, I could see her attempting to organize some kind of game with the children, her usually perfect hair coming loose from its elegant updo, a stain of unknown origin on her festive sweater. Taking my seat at the adult table, a first in recent memory, I surveyed the spread before me. Everything was still hot, still fresh, still waiting to be enjoyed. No lukewarm leftovers, no picked-over remnants, no half-eaten children's portions. I could feel the weight of disapproving stares as I filled my plate with Mom's honey-glazed ham, Aunt Janet's sweet potato casserole, and Cousin Rachel's famous green bean dish. The clinking of silverware against plates couldn't quite mask the tension in the room. I was halfway through enjoying my first proper holiday meal in years when Sarah finally snapped. She'd been watching me eat with the kind of intensity usually reserved for nature documentaries about predators and prey. "Well," she announced to the table at large, her voice dripping with sarcasm, looks like someone's gotten a little too big for their boots at college. Seems they've forgotten all about sisterly duties. I took my time with my spoonful of mashed potatoes, deliberately licking the spoon clean before responding. The food really was excellent when you got to eat it fresh. Funny thing about sisterly duties, I replied, keeping my voice level and calm. I don't remember seeing free babysitter in any sisterhood manual. Maybe you could point that chapter out to me? Right after the part where parents are supposed to watch their own children? The gasps around the table would have been comical if they weren't so genuine. Aunt Janet actually clutched her pearls. I hadn't known people really did that outside of movies. Cousin Rachel was suddenly very interested in her green beans, while Uncle Mike seemed to be trying to disappear into his dinner roll. Mom and Dad exchanged that special look they had, the one that meant they were disappointed but didn't want to cause a scene. Dad's fork was frozen halfway to his mouth, and Mom's smile had gone tight around the edges. But instead of the lecture I expected, Mom cleared her throat and asked Uncle Mike about his new job. The conversation stuttered back to life, though everyone kept shooting glances my way as if expecting me to sprout a second head. I just kept eating, savoring every bite of food that hadn't been picked over by tiny hands or gone cold while I changed diapers. About 20 minutes into dinner, Emma appeared in the doorway, looking like she'd been through a war. Her Christmas sweater was now sporting what looked like juice stains in addition to the earlier unknown substance, and her hair had completely escaped its elegant updo. "Sarah," she called, her voice carrying a hint of desperation. "Could you?" Sarah shot me one last withering look before pushing back from the table. The sisters exchanged places, with Emma practically collapsing into the vacated chair. She looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired I'd been feeling every holiday for years. Emma filled her plate mechanically, but she couldn't seem to resist giving me the stink eye between bites. I met her gaze and shrugged, then went back to enjoying my dinner. After finishing my meal, including 2 servings of Mom's apple pie, a luxury I'd never been able to enjoy before, I quietly excused myself from the table. No one protested. No one asked me to help clean up. No one demanded I take a shift with the kids. Morning light filtered through the living room windows as I came downstairs, still riding the high of my peaceful Christmas evening. That feeling evaporated the moment I saw them, Mom, Dad, Sarah, and Emma, sitting in an obvious ambush formation. Sarah didn't waste any time. "What kind of performance was that yesterday?" she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Making us look like bad parents in front of everyone?" I sank into an armchair, surprisingly calm. "Performance? You mean me wanting to enjoy Christmas like everyone else? I'm just tired of being the unpaid, unappreciated babysitter while everyone else gets to have an actual holiday." "But you never complained before," Mom interjected, her brow furrowed with confusion. I couldn't help but laugh. "Never complained? I've been complaining for years, Mom. But it was just too convenient to ignore me, wasn't it? Too easy to keep exploiting the good little sister who never makes waves." They all started talking at once, their voices overlapping in a chorus of accusations and reminders of sisterly duty and family obligation. Dad kept mentioning how much they'd done for me over the years, Mom brought up how well they'd raised me, and my sisters alternated between guilt trips and outright attacks. I let them run out of steam before speaking again. "They're not my children," I said quietly but firmly. "I didn't give birth to them. I didn't decide to have them. They're your responsibility, not mine. Especially during the holidays when I'm supposed to be relaxing too." That's when Sarah played what she thought was her trump card. She stood up, her face flushed with anger. "Well, maybe it's time someone taught you a lesson about gratitude. Let's see how you manage without Mom and Dad paying your college tuition." The room fell silent. I watched Mom and Dad exchange uncertain glances, clearly caught off guard by this suggestion. But instead of the panic Sarah clearly expected to see on my face, I felt a strange sense of relief. Finally, all the cards were on the table. I stood up slowly. "Actually, Sarah, Grandma's been paying my tuition from Grandpa's education fund, you know, the one he set up for all his granddaughters." The same fund that helped put you through nursing school and Emma through business school? And even if that wasn't the case, I have a partial scholarship. Plus, unlike some people, I'm not afraid of working to support myself. Without waiting for their response, I turned and walked upstairs. It took me less than 10 minutes to pack my bags. I'd gotten good at traveling light over the years. As I came back down, Mom and Dad started calling after me, their voices a mixture of anger and panic. But I was done talking. I walked out the front door, letting it close behind me on their protests and recriminations. The winter air bit at my cheeks as I headed to my car, but I barely felt it. The drive back to campus was oddly peaceful. As the miles between me and home increased, I systematically blocked their numbers: Mom, Dad, Sarah, Emma. Each tap on my phone screen felt like breaking another link in a chain I hadn't even realized was weighing me down. My dorm room welcomed me back with its blessed simplicity: no toys scattered across the floor, no sticky fingerprints on the windows, no constant background noise of children demanding attention. Just my books, my laptop, and my own thoughts. January passed in a blur of new classes and quiet weekends. February brought snow and a blessed lack of family drama. I threw myself into my studies, made plans with friends, and for the first time in years, felt like I was living my own life instead of existing in the margins of everyone else's. Then, one cold Saturday morning in late February, I looked out my dorm window and saw them, Mom, Dad, and Emma, standing in the parking lot, looking uncertain and out of place among the students rushing to and from classes. My first instinct was to pretend I wasn't home, but something in their body language made me pause. They looked different. Smaller somehow. Less like authority figures, and more like people who'd driven 4 hours to right a wrong. I met them in the lobby. Emma spoke first. "Can we buy you coffee? We'd like to talk." The campus cafe was quiet that morning. We sat at a corner table, steam rising from our cups, the silence heavy with unspoken words. Mom was the first to break it. "We've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her cup. "After you left, well, we had some long conversations as a family." "Very long conversations," Emma added, meeting my eyes directly. "Ruby, we were wrong. All of us. We took advantage of you for years and called it family duty to make ourselves feel better about it." Dad cleared his throat. "We didn't realize, or maybe we didn't want to realize, how unfair it was. You deserved your own holidays, your own time. You deserved to be treated like an adult, not the family babysitter." I took a long sip of my coffee, letting their words sink in. "What about Sarah?" Emma sighed. "Sarah, she's still processing. You know how she is, she has trouble admitting when she's wrong. But the rest of us, we want to do better. Things will be different now," Mom promised. "No more pushing the kids on you. No more expecting you to give up your holidays. We want you to come home because you want to, not because you're needed for childcare." I studied their faces, the sincerity in Mom's eyes, the regret in Dad's expression, the openness in Emma's posture. "Okay," I said finally. "I believe you." That evening, after they'd left, I unblocked their numbers. Within minutes, I had a text from Emma: "Miss you, little sis. For real this time." The following months brought a new normal. I visited home some weekends, and it was actually pleasant. When Emma brought her kids, she watched them herself or hired a babysitter. Mom stopped trying to orchestrate family bonding moments that always seemed to end with me in charge of a pack of children. Sarah and I still haven't spoken. Sometimes I see her posts on social media, pictures of her boys growing up so fast. Part of me hopes that one day she'll realize what she did wrong, that she'll reach out first. Until then, I'm at peace with the distance. I remember the day my parents sat me down in our living room like it was yesterday. I was 7, wearing my favorite purple dress with butterflies, clutching my worn teddy bear as Mom and Dad explained they wouldn't be living together anymore. They were so calm about it. No screaming, no throwing things, just two adults who'd fallen out of love, deciding to go their separate ways. I didn't cry. Maybe I was too young to really understand what was happening. They divided everything so neatly. The house went to Mom, Dad moved into a new apartment, and I got 2 bedrooms. The custody arrangement was simple, 1 week with Mom, 1 week with Dad. And Dad, being Dad, made sure Mom and I were well taken care of financially. About a year after the divorce, Dad met Sarah. I still remember the first time he introduced us at a local diner. She had kind eyes and a warm smile, and her son Tommy was sitting next to her, playing with his French fries. "Hi Brittany," Sarah said, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Your dad's told me so much about you." Tommy looked up from his plate. "Are you gonna be my sister?" I liked them immediately. Sarah didn't try too hard or act fake nice like some of Dad's previous dates. She was just real. And Tommy, who was 3 years younger than me, became the brother I never had. Around the same time, Mom started dating Richard. He moved in pretty quickly, and I noticed Mom seemed different, distracted, always touching her stomach when she thought no one was looking. They got married in a small ceremony at City Hall, and 2 months later, my half-sister Emily was born. I remember standing in the hospital room, looking at this tiny pink bundle in Mom's arms. Richard was hovering over them both, completely absorbed. I stood in the corner, shifting from foot to foot, feeling like I was watching a family portrait being painted, one that didn't include me. Dad and Sarah got married that same year. Their wedding was different, they made sure Tommy and I felt included in everything. Sarah even let me help pick out her dress, and during the ceremony, Dad made sure to include special vows to both Tommy and me. "Today I'm not just gaining a wife," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm gaining another child to love, and our 2 amazing kids are gaining a bigger family." That night, as Sarah tucked me into bed in my room at their house, she kissed my forehead and said, "You know, Brittany, I always wanted a daughter. Thank you for letting me be part of your life." I hugged her tight, already knowing that while my family situation wasn't typical, I was lucky to have at least one home where I truly belonged. Life at Mom's house changed after Emily was born. It wasn't anything dramatic, no harsh words or cruel treatment. It was more like I was slowly fading into the background, becoming a ghost in my own home. Mom quit her job to become a full-time housewife, and everything began revolving around Emily. At first, I tried to tell myself it was normal. Of course a baby needs more attention. But as the months passed, the forgetting started. Little things at first, then bigger ones. I remember standing outside school in the rain, watching other kids leave with their parents after the parent-teacher conference. Mrs. Johnson, my 4th grade teacher, waited with me for almost an hour before calling Mom. "Oh God, was that today?" Mom's voice crackled through the phone. "I'm so sorry, I was at Emily's Mommy and Me class. Can we reschedule?" We never did reschedule. Richard just picked me up that day, barely glancing at me as he drove home, talking on his phone about work the whole time. Then came my 10th birthday. I woke up excited, running downstairs, expecting at least a happy birthday from Mom. Instead, I found her cooing over Emily in the kitchen. "Mom," I said, hovering by the doorway. "Do you know what day it is?" She looked up, distracted. "Tuesday? Oh, I need to take Emily to her doctor's appointment." I stood there, my heart sinking. "It's my birthday." "Oh," her eyes widened. "Oh, Brittany, I'm so sorry." We'll celebrate this weekend, okay? I just have so much going on today with Emily's checkup." But the weekend came and went, and no one mentioned my birthday again. It became easier to spend time at Dad's house. Sarah always made sure my favorite snacks were in the pantry, and Tommy and I would spend hours playing video games or doing homework together. Dad never missed a single school event, and Sarah often came too, taking pictures and beaming like I was her own daughter. I started spending more and more time there. A few days turned into weeks, then months. Mom barely seemed to notice. When I was at her house, she was always busy with Emily, feeding her, playing with her, taking her to playdates. Richard would come home from work, kiss Emily on the forehead, and retreat to his home office. Sometimes I wondered if they'd even notice if I disappeared completely. After about 6 months of me basically living at Dad's full-time, he decided to make it official. "I called your mom today," he told me one evening. "I think it makes sense for you to live here permanently. You're already here most of the time anyway, and I told her I'd stop the alimony payments since I'm taking care of you full-time now." Within hours, Mom was at the door, all worried looks and loving words. "Sweetie, I've missed you so much," she said, hugging me for the first time in what felt like forever. "I've been thinking about everything, and I want us to go back to our original arrangement. I want you home with me half the time, like before." I was 12 by then, old enough to see through it. The sudden concern, the promises to do better, it wasn't about missing me. It was about the money. Dad's alimony checks were the real reason she wanted me back. Emily was 5 when she started rubbing it in my face. She'd follow me around the house with this smug little smile, dropping her bombs when Mom and Richard weren't within earshot. "Daddy says you're not really part of our family," she told me one day while I was doing homework at the kitchen table. "He says you're just visiting." I tried to ignore her, focusing on my math problems, but she kept going. "Mommy and Daddy love me more than you. Last night, Daddy told Mommy he was tired of you being here. And Mommy said just wait until you turn 18, then the money stops and you'll be gone." It hurt, of course it did. But I'd learned to build walls around that pain. I had Dad and Sarah, who showed me what real family love looked like. I had Tommy, who was more of a sibling to me than Emily would ever be. Still, hearing your own mother basically counting down the days until she didn't have to deal with you anymore, that leaves scars. The years crawled by until finally, I made it to high school graduation. I sat between my two families during the ceremony, Dad, Sarah, and Tommy on one side, Mom, Richard, and Emily on the other. It felt like sitting between two different worlds. After the ceremony, Dad hugged me tight. "We're so proud of you, Princess." Meanwhile, Mom and Richard were already talking about my departure before we even left the school parking lot. "So," Richard said, jingling his car keys, "have you started packing yet?" They didn't ask about my college plans. Didn't care that I'd gotten into the business program with a partial scholarship. Didn't even pretend to be interested in my future. They just wanted to know when I'd be out of their hair. 2 weeks later, I moved my things to Dad's house. I remember sitting in his living room, nervous about asking for help with college expenses even though I knew he'd never refuse. "Dad, I got accepted to the financial analyst program," I said, playing with the acceptance letter in my hands. "I got a partial scholarship, but..." Before I could finish, Dad and Sarah exchanged glances and smiled. "We've already got it covered, honey," Sarah said, pulling out a folder. "We'd been saving for your college fund since you were 8. I spent that summer working at the Silver Spoon Cafe, saving every penny I could. My shifts were mostly morning ones, which left my afternoons free to spend time with my real family. Tommy and I would go to movies, Sarah taught me to cook proper meals for when I'd be living in the dorm, and Dad, well, Dad just kept being Dad, always there with advice or a hug when I needed one. Mom never called to ask about my plans. Never stopped by to see how I was doing. Never seemed to care that her oldest daughter was about to leave for college. But by then, I'd stopped expecting her to care. College life started in a blur of new faces and experiences. My dorm room was tiny but cozy, and my roommate Jenny was nice enough, though we never became close friends. Between classes and my job at the campus cafe, I barely had time to breathe, but I made sure to call Dad and Sarah at least twice a week. They came to visit whenever they could, and Tommy would tag along, complaining about having to carry my laundry basket but always bringing me my favorite snacks from home. Mom never called. Not once. My 19th birthday came and went without even a text message from her. I shouldn't have checked my phone that day, shouldn't have hoped, but old habits die hard. Later that night, I made the mistake of checking her Facebook page. There they were, dozens of pictures of her perfect family. Mom, Richard, and Emily at the beach. Emily's dance recitals, family dinners, holiday celebrations. Each photo carefully staged to show their happiness, each caption talking about family time and loving my family. I wasn't in any of them, of course. I'd been cropped out of their family portrait long ago. I threw myself into my studies after that, determined to prove that I didn't need their approval to succeed. The years flew by, and before I knew it, I was walking across the stage to receive my diploma in financial analysis. Dad cheered so loud you'd have thought I'd won an Olympic medal. After graduation, Sarah approached me with an opportunity. Her brother Mark ran a successful investment firm in our hometown, and she'd mentioned my academic achievements to him. The interview with Mark went well. He was professional but warm, reminding me a bit of Sarah in the way he got straight to the point while still making you feel at ease. "Your credentials are impressive," he said, reviewing my resume. "But I need to be clear, the fact that you're my sister's stepdaughter won't earn you any favors here. You'll have to prove yourself just like everyone else." "I wouldn't want it any other way," I replied. I got the job and rented a small one-bedroom apartment near the office. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I worked harder than I'd ever worked before, taking on the projects nobody else wanted, staying late to perfect financial models, developing comprehensive growth strategies for our clients. The results spoke for themselves. Client portfolios under my management showed remarkable growth. The company's revenue increased significantly, and Mark noticed. He didn't play favorites, but he did believe in rewarding good work. The bonuses and raises came because I'd earned them, not because I was family. The first thing I did with my surprise year-end bonus was buy gifts for my real family. A new golf set for Dad, who'd been using the same clubs for 15 years. A spa weekend package for Sarah, who never splurged on herself. The latest gaming console for Tommy, who was still using his old one from high school. Watching them open their gifts, seeing their genuine happiness and surprise, I felt something settle in my chest. I might have been cut out of one family photo album, but I'd found my place in a better one. After 5 years of hard work, I had a solid plan. Every month, I put away a chunk of my salary into my savings account. I'd researched the housing market thoroughly, looking for the perfect property. I wanted something modest but comfortable, maybe with a small garden. Most importantly, I wanted to make a substantial down payment to keep the monthly mortgage payments manageable. Then came the phone call that changed everything. I was at my desk, reviewing quarterly reports, when my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in years. "Brittany, sweetie." Mom's voice was syrupy sweet. "I've been thinking about you so much lately." I nearly dropped my coffee. 9 years of silence, and now this? "How are you, Mom?" I kept my voice neutral. "Oh, honey, I miss you." "We all do. Why don't you come over for dinner this weekend? Emily's home from college, and Richard's making his famous pot roast." Curiosity got the better of me. That Saturday, I pulled up to my old house in my new Mercedes, nothing flashy, but reliable and professional. Emily answered the door, looking me up and down with poorly concealed interest. "Nice car," she said by way of greeting. The house hadn't changed much. Same furniture, same family photos on the walls, still none of me. Mom rushed forward to hug me, acting like we'd just seen each other yesterday. "Darling, you look fantastic. So professional in that suit." "Richard, doesn't she look successful?" Richard nodded, pulling out my chair. "We heard you're doing very well at Mark's company. The family grapevine says you're one of their top performers." Throughout dinner, they peppered me with questions about my job, my salary, my car. Mom kept mentioning how expensive everything was these days, especially with Emily in college. "That's such a beautiful watch," Mom commented, reaching for my wrist. "Must have cost a fortune." I smiled politely. "It was a birthday gift from Dad and Sarah." "Of course it was," she said, her smile tightening slightly. "They always did spoil you." That dinner turned into more invitations. Suddenly, Mom wanted to be part of my life again. She'd call regularly, stop by my apartment unannounced with Emily in tow, invite me to family dinners. Emily would wander around my modest apartment, examining everything with calculating eyes. "This place is kind of small," she commented once. "I thought you made good money." I kept my responses vague. "It suits my needs." Mom would chime in, "But surely you're planning to upgrade soon? With your salary?" I'd just smile and change the subject. Something about their sudden interest in my life made me uneasy. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. Emily was over at my apartment, supposedly to bond with her big sister. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard her gasp from my living room. "Oh my God," she said, staring at my laptop screen. I'd left my banking app open after paying some bills. "Is that really how much money you have saved?" I quickly walked over and closed the laptop. "It's not polite to look at other people's private information, Emily." She ignored my comment. "Why are you saving so much? What's it for?" I hesitated, but figured there was no harm in telling her. "I'm planning to buy a house soon. I want to make a good down payment to keep the mortgage payments reasonable." Emily just nodded, but I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. She left shortly after, making some excuse about meeting friends. The very next day, Mom called to invite me to dinner. As soon as I sat down at their dining table, I knew something was up. Mom had that look she used to get when she was about to ask Dad for more child support. "Emily tells me you're quite the saver," she said, passing the potatoes. "That's wonderful, honey. You know, Emily's having such a hard time with college expenses. And she'll need an apartment after graduation." I took a bite of my food, saying nothing. "It would be so nice if her successful big sister could help her out," Mom continued, her voice dripping with suggestion. "Family helping family, you know?" I put down my fork. "I don't understand what you're getting at, Mom." "Oh, come on, Brittany," she said, dropping the sweet act. "You're clearly doing very well for yourself. Emily needs help with an apartment, and you have more than enough money saved up. It would be the right thing to do." I looked at her incredulously. "The right thing to do? You mean give Emily my house down payment?" "Well, you're already established in your career," Richard chimed in. "Emily's just starting out. She needs the help more than you do." "I'm not established," I said firmly. "I'm working hard and saving my money to build my own future. I'm not giving Emily my savings." Mom's face darkened. "So you're just going to let your sister struggle while you sit on a pile of money? After all we've done for you?" I almost laughed at that. "All you've done for me? Like what exactly? Forget my birthdays? Ignore me for years? Push me aside for Emily?" "You're being selfish," Richard muttered, not quite meeting my eyes. "A real sister would want to help. A real mother would have been there for both her daughters," I shot back, standing up. "I'm taking care of myself first. Emily is your responsibility, not mine." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom sat there, jaw clenched, while Richard glared at his plate. Emily wasn't at this dinner, but I could imagine her reaction when they told her later. Poor Emily, whose selfish big sister wouldn't give her a free apartment. 2 weeks after that disastrous dinner, I had to leave for a business trip to Singapore. Mark had trusted me with an important client presentation, and I'd be out of reach for most of the time due to the time difference and packed schedule. "I'll be gone for about 10 days, I told Mom when she called, trying to maintain some semblance of politeness despite our recent argument. "Just letting you know I'll be out of contact." "Oh, overseas? How nice for you," she replied, her voice oddly interested. The trip went well, but when I landed back home, my phone exploded with notifications as soon as I turned off airplane mode. Banking alerts. Dozens of them. My hands started shaking as I scrolled through them. Account transfer, $100,750. The world started spinning. I rushed home, threw open my laptop, and logged into my banking app. There it was, a massive transfer to an account I didn't recognize. But the name on the transfer. Patricia Warren, my mother's name. I drove to their house like a woman possessed, my banking app screenshots pulled up on my phone. When I pounded on their door, Richard answered with a smug look that made my blood boil. "Where is she?" I demanded, pushing past him. Mom was sitting in the living room, calm as could be, flipping through a magazine. "Oh, you're back. How was your trip?" I thrust my phone in her face. "What is this? How did you transfer money from my account?" She barely glanced at the screen. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me. It's right here, a transfer to your account." "How did you do it?" Mom finally dropped the innocent act. She put down her magazine and smiled, actually smiled. "Fine. Yes, I transferred the money. Emily needs an apartment, and you weren't being cooperative. So we helped ourselves." "How did you even get into my apartment?" My voice was shaking. "Oh, honey," she reached into her purse and held up a key. "Remember when I borrowed your bathroom that day I visited? It only takes a minute to make a copy." I felt sick to my stomach. "Give me my money back, now. Or I'm going to the police." Mom actually laughed. "Don't be ridiculous. You won't go to the police, I'm your mother. Besides, you can always save up again. You have a good job, no responsibilities. Emily needs this more than you do. We've already found her the perfect apartment." "I'm serious," I cut her off. "Return my money, or I'm..." "Or what?" Mom sneered. "You'll send your own mother to jail? Please. You don't have the spine." Richard grabbed my arm and started pushing me toward the door. "I think it's time for you to leave. This is your last chance," I warned them. "Give me back my money." Mom's only response was to wave goodbye with a smirk. Richard shoved me out onto the porch and slammed the door in my face. The police station was quiet that night. I sat across from Detective Martinez, my hand steady as I filled out the complaint form. I had everything documented: the unauthorized transfer, screenshots of the banking app, text messages with my mother about my business trip. Richard called me that same night, his voice alternating between threats and pleas. "You need to withdraw the complaint," he demanded. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to your mother? Your mother's crying." I hung up. Let her cry. I'd cried plenty of times over the years, because of her. The legal process moved surprisingly quickly. The evidence was overwhelming, and Mom's arrogant admission to the theft didn't help her case. She sat in the courtroom, playing the role of the repentant mother, tears streaming down her face as she promised to return every penny. "I just wanted to help my younger daughter," she sobbed to the judge. I let my maternal instincts cloud my judgment. I almost laughed out loud. "Maternal instincts? Since when?" The judge wasn't impressed. "Mrs. Warren, your maternal instincts led you to commit premeditated theft and fraud against your other daughter. The only reason you're not going to prison is that you've agreed to make full restitution and have no prior criminal record." She got a suspended sentence and was ordered to return my money within 30 days. I got a restraining order against both her and Richard, just to be safe. Dad and Sarah were with me through all of it. They sat behind me in court, brought me dinner when I was too exhausted to cook, and never once said "I told you so" about letting Mom back into my life. "You did the right thing," Sarah told me after the sentencing. "They needed to learn they couldn't take advantage of you anymore." Tommy, in his typical fashion, tried to lighten the mood. "Well, at least now you know for sure which family actually loves you." He was right. The lines were clear now. I had my real family: Dad, Sarah, Tommy, even Mark, who'd been incredibly supportive through the whole ordeal. And then there were the others: Mom, Richard, Emily, who'd shown their true colors in the most dramatic way possible. 6 months have passed since then. My money is back in my account, earning interest while I house hunt. I've got my eye on a lovely 3-bedroom colonial with a fenced backyard, just 10 minutes from Dad and Sarah's place. The mortgage paperwork is being processed, and this time, I'm the only one with keys to my home. Mom still tries to reach out sometimes, through relatives or mutual acquaintances. She claims she's changed, that she's sorry, that she wants to make amends. But I'm done giving chances to people who see me as nothing but a resource to exploit. Yesterday, I had dinner with my real family to celebrate my upcoming house purchase. As we sat around Sarah and Dad's dining table, sharing jokes and making plans for my housewarming party, I realized something. Sometimes the family you choose is better than the family you're born into. And sometimes, letting go of toxic relationships is the healthiest thing you can do for yourself. In 2 weeks, I'll be signing the papers for my new house. Dad's already planning to help me paint the walls, and Sarah's been sending me links to furniture she thinks would look perfect in my living room. This is what family should be: people who support you, love you, and would never dream of hurting you for their own gain. As for Mom, Richard, and Emily, they can keep their perfect family photos and their manipulative games. I've got something better: a real family, a clear conscience, and soon, a house with exactly one set of keys. My name is Madison, and my story begins when my mom married my dad, though he wasn't just my dad at the time. He was also Kayla's dad, having gone through a divorce when Kayla was only 2. Looking back, I have to admit our family situation was pretty unique. Unlike the stereotypical evil stepmother scenario you see in movies, my mom actually got along great with Kayla's mom. They'd chat on the phone, coordinate visits, and even have coffee together sometimes. Kayla would come over on weekends and holidays, and initially, everything was perfect. We were close in age, and despite being stepsisters, we clicked immediately. We'd spend hours playing together, sharing secrets, and doing all the things sisters do. I remember how we'd build blanket forts in the living room and stay up late watching movies, trying to stifle our giggles so our parents wouldn't hear us. But as we got older, things started to change. High school brought new friends, different interests, and slowly but surely, we began drifting apart. Kayla found her own crowd, and I noticed she was becoming, well, less tidy would be putting it mildly. "Kayla, could you please pick up your stuff from the bathroom?" I'd ask, trying to keep the irritation out of my voice. Yeah, I'll do it later," she'd reply, not even looking up from her phone. But later never seemed to come. Instead, my mom would eventually tell me to clean up after her. "Madison, honey, just take care of it," Mom would say. "She's our guest, after all." I'd grit my teeth and do it, but each time it happened, a tiny seed of resentment took root. Still, I kept my mouth shut. What else could I do? Even then, I was the responsible one, the one who understood the importance of maintaining peace in our blended family. After high school, I threw myself into college life. I worked hard, studied harder, and started saving every penny I could from my part-time jobs. My grandparents, Mom's parents, were always supportive, telling me how proud they were of my independence. After graduation, I landed a good job, the kind with benefits and regular hours. The pay was decent enough that I could start looking for my own place, though renting at first. Every month, I'd put aside a chunk of my salary, watching my savings grow slowly but surely. My parents were supportive too, in their own way. They'd stop by my rental apartment with home-cooked meals and random household items they thought I might need. But it was my grandparents who really helped make my dream of homeownership a reality. Between my savings, their generous contribution, and my parents' help with renovation costs and furniture, I finally bought my own place. That first night in my new apartment, I stood in the middle of my living room, breathing in the fresh paint smell and feeling like I'd finally made it. Everything was exactly where I wanted it, including the antique dining set my great-grandmother had left me and the expensive bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. 6 months after I moved in, Mom called. "Honey, I need to ask you a favor," she said over the phone. Her voice had that sweet, careful tone she uses when she wants something big. "It's about Kayla." I felt my stomach tighten. "What about her?" "She's found a job here in the city. Isn't that wonderful?" Mom paused for effect. But she needs a place to stay while she gets settled. Just for a couple of months. I gripped my phone tighter. Mom. She can't afford rent yet, and you have that spare room, Mom continued. It would mean so much to all of us. You know how hard it is starting out. I closed my eyes, remembering all those times Kayla had left our house looking like a tornado hit it when we were younger. But maybe she'd grown up. Maybe she'd changed. It was only for 2 months, right? Okay, I heard myself say. But just for 2 months. Oh, sweetie, thank you. You're such a good sister, Mom gushed. Kayla will be there tomorrow. Kayla breezed in with 4 massive suitcases and immediately started unpacking, by which I mean she started throwing her clothes everywhere. Within an hour, my pristine living room looked like a clothing bomb had exploded. That night, I came home from work to find dirty dishes piled in the sink and half-eaten takeout containers scattered across the kitchen counter. Kayla was sprawled on my couch, watching TV. Hey, could you wash your dishes? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. I'll get to it, she said, not looking away from the screen. She never got to it. Days passed, and the situation only got worse. One morning, I opened my closet to find several of my favorite outfits missing. I found them later, in Kayla's room, crumpled on the floor. What the hell, Kayla? I confronted her. Why are you taking my clothes without asking? She rolled her eyes. Come on, we're the same size. Don't be so uptight about it. We're sisters, remember? Sisters ask permission, I muttered, but she was already walking away. The final straw was the food situation. I'd always enjoyed cooking, making enough for leftovers to take to work the next day. But now, I'd come home to find everything I'd made the night before completely gone, with nothing prepared in return. Kayla, you can't keep eating all the food without contributing, I said one evening, standing in front of my empty fridge. She looked up from her phone, annoyed. I'm a guest here, Madison. You're the host, you're supposed to take care of your guests. Besides, this isn't even my kitchen. Guest or not, you need to help out, I insisted. Whatever, she shrugged. If you're going to be so weird about it, I'll just order takeout. I stood there, watching her scroll through her delivery apps, feeling my blood pressure rise. This wasn't what I'd signed up for. But every time I thought about confronting her more seriously, I heard my mom's voice in my head, you're such a good sister. 2 weeks into this nightmare of cohabitation, I was already counting down the days until my apartment would be mine again. Work had been particularly rough that day, and all I wanted was to come home, heat up some leftovers, if there were any, and collapse on my couch. Instead, I walked into darkness. At first, I thought maybe Kayla had finally gone out for the evening, giving me some peace and quiet. But then I noticed the flickering light coming from my living room. As I turned the corner, I stopped dead in my tracks. There, at my dining table, using my great-grandmother's antique dining set that I barely used myself because of how precious it was to me, sat Kayla and some guy I'd never seen before. Candles were lit everywhere, creating what was supposed to be a romantic atmosphere. They were leaning in close to each other, giggling and kissing between bites of what looked like takeout arranged on my family heirlooms. But what really made my blood boil was the open bottle on the table, my bottle. The expensive wine I'd been saving for a special occasion, now half empty between these two strangers. I slapped the light switch on. What the hell is this? Kayla jumped, then rolled her eyes when she saw it was me. Oh my God, Madison, you scared us. Who is this? I demanded, pointing at the guy who was now giving me an annoyed look. And why are you using my great-grandmother's china? And that wine was expensive and saved for a special occasion. This is Derek, Kayla said casually, as if this was all perfectly normal. And this is a special occasion, it's our 3rd date. I don't care if it's your wedding dinner. You have no right to bring strangers into my home without asking, and you definitely have no right to use my things without permission. Derek cleared his throat. Hey, we're trying to have a romantic evening here. Could you give us some privacy? Maybe go grab coffee somewhere or stay at a friend's place tonight? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Excuse me? Yeah, Kayla chimed in, wrapping an arm around Derek's shoulders. We'd appreciate some alone time. It's not cool to crash someone's date like this. Crash someone's date? This is my apartment. Come on, sis, Kayla whined. Don't be such a buzzkill. We just want to spend some quality time together. Quality time? Get out. I pointed at Derek. You need to leave right now. Or what? Derek smirked. Or I'm calling the police and having you removed for trespassing. You wouldn't dare, Kayla gasped. I pulled out my phone and started dialing. Try me. Derek's smirk vanished. He stood up, grabbing his jacket. Whatever. This is ridiculous, I'm out of here. Derek, wait. Kayla called after him as he headed for the door. She turned to glare at me. Thanks a lot, Madison. Thanks for ruining everything. She grabbed her purse and stormed out after him, slamming the door so hard my pictures rattled on the walls. My phone rang early the next morning. Mom's name flashed across the screen, and I already knew this wasn't going to be good. How could you? She started before I could even say hello. Your own sister. Mom, let me explain. Explain what? How you humiliated that poor girl in front of her date. How you threatened to call the police on her. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Did she tell you she was using great-grandma's china? Or that she opened my expensive wine without asking? Oh, Madison, Mom's voice dripped with disappointment. When did you become so selfish? So arrogant? Your sister is trying to build a life here, and you're treating her like a criminal. She brought a complete stranger into my home without. She's an unhappy girl who needs her family's support right now. But clearly, you're too wrapped up in your own little world to see that. Before I could defend myself further, Mom hung up. I stared at my phone, feeling a mixture of anger and hurt bubbling up inside me. But I didn't have long to process, because barely an hour later, my phone rang again. This time it was Kayla's mom. Madison, her voice was sharp. We need to talk about your behavior. My behavior? I couldn't help but laugh. What about Kayla's behavior? You know, ever since you bought that apartment, you've changed. Become arrogant, selfish. That's not fair. Not fair? I'll tell you what's not fair. Have you forgotten when you and your mother first moved here? You stayed at our house for 2 weeks. Kayla and I treated you both with nothing but respect. We didn't kick you out or threaten to call the police on you. That was completely different, I protested. We didn't trash your house or use your personal belongings without permission. Look, I come home exhausted from work every day, and instead of resting, I'm cleaning up after Kayla. She doesn't wash dishes, doesn't do laundry. You're being too strict with her, Kayla's mom cut me off. She tells me how hard it is living with you, how biased you are against her. These are little things, Madison. You need to stop being so uptight about every little thing. Little things? It's about basic respect. She doesn't appreciate anything I do, doesn't respect my home or my belongings. She's your sister. Well, if she doesn't like living with me, she's welcome to leave my apartment right now. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. I see, Kayla's mom's voice turned ice cold. I'll be speaking to your father and mother about this. Don't think this is over. The line went dead. I sat there, my hands shaking with frustration. How had I become the villain in this story? All I wanted was some basic respect and consideration in my own home. Was that really too much to ask? My phone rang again a few hours later. Mom's name flashed on the screen for the second time that day. I almost didn't answer, but I knew ignoring her would only make things worse. My finger hovered over the decline button for a moment before I finally accepted the call, bracing myself for what was coming. What is wrong with you? She didn't even say hello. I just got off the phone with Kayla's mother. She's incredibly upset. I slumped onto my couch, feeling a headache starting to form. Mom, do you have any idea how hard I've worked to maintain this relationship with her? Your father's ex-wife and I have always gotten along wonderfully. I'm proud of that. And now you're ruining everything. Do you know how rare it is for divorced families to get along like we do? I'm ruining everything? I sat up straight, my voice rising. Mom, you promised me Kayla wouldn't interfere with my life. You said I'd barely see her because she'd be at work all day. Well, guess what? It's been 2 weeks, and she hasn't gone to a single job interview. Not one. She's looking. No, she's not. She stays home all day, making a mess of my apartment, and bringing random guys over. You want to know what she's really doing? She sits on my couch all day watching TV shows and ordering takeout. She doesn't wash her clothes, doesn't cook, doesn't clean, won't even wash a single dish. Every day I come home from work to complete chaos. Do you know what it's like to work a full day and come home to find your kitchen destroyed and all your food eaten? Honey, Mom's voice took on that condescending tone I hated, the one she used when she thought she was being the voice of reason. Kayla isn't used to living independently. She doesn't know how to do these things yet. She's never had to take care of herself before. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I paced around my living room, stepping over Kayla's discarded shoes. She's an adult, Mom. She should know how to wash a dish. These aren't complicated skills we're talking about. This is basic human courtesy. You're the hostess, Madison. It's your responsibility to be hospitable and take care of your guests. This attitude of yours. I didn't raise you to be like this. I raised you to be generous and kind, especially to family. I felt the frustration building in my chest as my mother continued lecturing me about hospitality and family duty. Every word just reminded me of the constant disrespect I'd been enduring in my own home. The wine stains on my carpet caught my eye, remnants from Kayla's romantic dinner, and something inside me finally snapped. You know what, Mom? I interrupted her mid-sentence, my voice rising with every word. I'm done trying to explain this to you. I'm done being the responsible one, the understanding one, the one who has to accommodate everything. I'm just completely tired of. I took a deep breath, my next words coming out in a burst of anger. I'm tired of Kayla behaving like a pig in my house. The moment those words left my mouth, I heard a small gasp behind me. My stomach dropped as I slowly turned around. There was Kayla, standing in the doorway, her face pale and her eyes wide. She must have come back to get something and heard everything. The look on her face made my anger evaporate instantly, replaced by a sickening wave of guilt. Kayla, I started, but she was already turning away. Madison, what's happening? My mom's voice was still coming through the phone, but I barely heard her. I watched, frozen in place, as Kayla walked straight to her room. I could hear her opening drawers and moving around. Within minutes, though it felt like hours, she emerged with her suitcases, the same ones she'd arrived with just 2 weeks ago. She didn't look at me as she walked past, didn't say a word. The only sound was the rolling of her suitcase wheels across my hardwood floors and then the soft click of the front door closing behind her. I stood there in the sudden silence, my phone still in my hand, my mother's voice a distant murmur. I hung up without saying goodbye. The following days were eerily quiet. No calls from my mother, no angry messages from Kayla's mom, nothing. The silence was worse than the arguing had been. I knew Kayla must have told her mother what happened, and her mother must have told mine, but no one was saying anything to me. The weight of that silence pressed down on me every day as I moved through my now spotless apartment. A week passed like this, until there was a knock at my door one evening. I opened it to find both my parents standing there. Mom's face was set in that expression I remembered from childhood, the one that meant I was in serious trouble. Dad looked tired. They came in, and Mom didn't waste any time. Do you have any idea what you've done? She started, pacing my living room. Calling your sister a pig? Making her feel so unwelcome that she had to leave in the middle of the night? I didn't raise you to be cruel, Madison. She continued listing my sins, each one delivered like a prosecutor at trial. I noticed Dad hadn't said anything yet, just stood there with his hands in his pockets, looking around my apartment. Mom noticed too. She turned to him suddenly. Why are you just standing there silent? Say something to your daughter. Tell her how disappointed you are. Dad cleared his throat, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Actually, he said slowly, I think both of our daughters are wrong in this situation. What? Mom and I said simultaneously. Madison, he turned to me, his voice gentle but firm, calling your sister a pig was wrong. It was hurtful, and it's the reason she left. You need to apologize for that. I nodded, feeling the shame fresh again. But, he continued, holding up a hand as Mom started to speak, I otherwise support Madison in this. Kayla needs to learn to behave like an adult, like an independent person. Maybe it will be the push she needs to start taking responsibility for her own life. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for our children is to let them face the consequences of their actions. My mother's face turned red. Oh, so now you want to parent? Where were you when I was helping Kayla find a job? When I was coordinating with her mother? Why do I have to take care of your eldest daughter more than you do? That's not fair, Dad started, but Mom cut him off. You know what's not fair? You sitting back silent all these years while I worked to keep this family together. Well, congratulations, now you can deal with your daughters yourself. Then she turned back to me, her anger finding a new target. And you? You think you can just throw your sister out whenever you feel like it? This is my property, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I can do what I want with it. Mom laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your property? You think you did this all by yourself? Almost everything in this apartment was bought with our money. She gestured wildly around the room before pointing dramatically at the bookcase against the wall. That bookcase belonged to my grandmother. It's a family heirloom, which means it's my furniture, not yours. I stood there for a moment, looking at the bookcase my mother was pointing at. Then, without a word, I walked over to it and started taking the books off the shelves. What are you doing? Mom demanded. Packing up your furniture, I replied, my hands shaking slightly as I continued emptying the shelves. I went to my storage closet and pulled out some moving boxes I'd kept from when I first moved in. Madison, stop this, Dad said quietly, but I ignored him. Don't worry, Mom, I said, starting to break down the bookcase. A courier will deliver this to your house tomorrow. Since it's your furniture, you should have it. Mom grabbed her purse. I can't deal with this right now. This isn't the daughter I raised. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Dad stood there awkwardly for a moment. Madison. You should go after her, Dad. He nodded sadly, then followed Mom out. I heard him call for a taxi in the hallway. True to my word, I had the bookcase delivered to my mother's house the next day. After that, silence fell over our family again. No calls, no texts, no family dinners. Just silence. A month passed like this. I threw myself into work, trying not to think about how everything had fallen apart. Then one afternoon, my phone lit up with my dad's number. Can we meet for coffee? He asked. That little cafe near your office? Sure, I agreed, grateful that at least someone in my family was still talking to me. But when I walked into the cafe the next day, I stopped short. There at the table with my father sat Kayla, nervously stirring a cup of coffee. For a moment, I considered turning around and walking out, but Dad had already seen me and waved me over. I took a deep breath and approached the table. No one spoke as I sat down. Kayla stared into her coffee cup, and I focused on arranging my purse on the back of my chair. Dad cleared his throat but didn't say anything. The awkward silence stretched on until a waitress came to take my order, giving us all a moment to collect ourselves. Finally, Kayla looked up. So, she started, then paused to take a breath. I got a job. That's That's great, I managed. Yeah, it is. And I found my own apartment. It's small, but it's nice. I can actually afford it now with my new salary. She smiled slightly. And, I'm still dating Derek. He thinks it's hilarious now. Keeps calling you the fighting girl. Says he's never seen anyone go from zero to calling the cops so fast. Despite everything, I found myself chuckling. Well, he was being pretty obnoxious. He was, Kayla admitted. We both were. She set down her coffee cup and looked me directly in the eyes. Madison, I'm really sorry. For everything. The mess, the disrespect, using your things without asking. I was acting like a spoiled teenager instead of an adult. I felt something tight in my chest begin to loosen. I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have called you a pig. That was cruel, and I regret it. I was just so frustrated. I know. I gave you plenty of reasons to be frustrated. Kayla reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Living on my own now, having to actually take care of everything myself, I get it. I get why you were so angry about the dishes and the cleaning and everything else. Since that day at the cafe, Kayla and I have been rebuilding our relationship. We meet for coffee regularly now, and she's actually become quite good at keeping her new apartment clean. She even invited me over for dinner recently, cooked it herself and everything. Things with Mom, though, that's a different story. Dad tells me she's not ready to reconcile yet. She needs time to think, he says, but I know it's more complicated than that. Mom has always prided herself on maintaining the perfect blended family, and I think my conflict with Kayla shattered that illusion for her. I stand by my actions, though. Yes, I could have handled some things better, but I don't believe I owe an apology to Mom or Kayla's mother for expecting basic respect in my own home. Yesterday, something interesting happened. A courier delivered a familiar bookcase to my apartment, the same one I'd sent to Mom months ago, in a fit of anger. There was no note, no explanation, just the bookcase. As I stood there looking at it, I couldn't help but wonder if this was Mom's way of extending an olive branch. I haven't called her about it yet. Some wounds need more time to heal, and some conversations need the right moment. For now, I put the bookcase back in its old spot, and every time I look at it, I think about how families are like books, sometimes they need to be taken apart and put back together before they can stand properly again. My name is Amber, and I never thought I'd be the one to cut ties with my family. But life has a way of showing you who people really are, especially during what should be the happiest moments. I met James 3 years ago at a tech conference where I was working as an event coordinator. He was different from the guys I usually dated, quiet, thoughtful, and incredibly intelligent. While I'd always been the life of the party like the rest of my family, there was something about his calm demeanor that drew me in. He worked as a senior programmer at a major tech company, and the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his projects made me fall for him instantly. You're nothing alike, my younger sister Rachel kept telling me when we started dating. He barely says 2 words at family dinners. She was 5 years younger than me, but always acted like she knew everything about relationships. Our parents, Tom and Linda, weren't much better. Honey, are you sure about him? Mom would ask whenever James left the room. He seemed so distant. I tried explaining countless times that James wasn't distant, he was just introverted. He preferred small gatherings to large parties, meaningful conversations to small talk. But my family never tried to understand. They saw his quietness as arrogance, his introversion as a personal slight against them. Despite their disapproval, James and I got married a year ago. It was a small ceremony, just the way we both wanted it. My family attended but spent most of the time making passive-aggressive comments about how different everything was from traditional family weddings. I don't understand why they can't accept you for who you are, I said to James one evening after another tense family dinner. He just smiled that gentle smile of his and shrugged. Not everyone needs to understand me, Amber. As long as you do. That's what I loved about him, his ability to stay above the drama, to not let other people's opinions affect him. But things were about to get much worse, and even his calm demeanor would be tested. It started with a phone call from Mom last weekend. "Amber, dear, we're having a family dinner next Saturday. Just you, though, we know James doesn't enjoy these gatherings." I felt my blood pressure rising. "What do you mean, just me?" "Well," Mom hesitated, her voice trailing off. "We're having some relatives over, and you know how James is with crowds. We thought it would be better if..." "If what, Mom?" "If my husband stayed home while I pretended to be single at family gatherings?" "Sorry, Mom, but I'm not coming without my husband. That's not how marriage works." I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking with anger. When I told James about it later, he just laughed. Everything changed when Rachel called me one sunny morning. Her voice was bubbling with excitement, and I could practically feel her jumping up and down through the phone. "Amber, oh my God, you won't believe it. Mark proposed last night," she squealed. My heart leaped with genuine joy. Despite our differences, I loved my sister, and I knew how much she cared about Mark. They'd been dating for over 2 years, and he seemed like a good guy, a high school teacher who shared Rachel's outgoing personality and love for social gatherings. "That's amazing, Rachel. I'm so happy for you," I said, already grabbing my car keys. "Are you at Mom and Dad's?" "Yes. Come over right now. We're starting to plan everything." 20 minutes later, I was walking into my parents' familiar living room. Rachel immediately ran to hug me, her engagement ring catching the light. Mom and Dad were beaming, and Mark stood nearby, looking both proud and slightly overwhelmed. "Show me the ring," I demanded, and Rachel proudly displayed the modest but beautiful diamond. We spent the next hour going through wedding magazines and discussing dates. Then Mom's expression turned serious. "The only issue is, well, we're a bit tight on money right now," she said, looking uncomfortable. "With Dad's recent medical bills and everything." I watched Rachel's face fall slightly, though she tried to hide it. Without hesitation, I heard myself say, "I'll give you $10,000 for the wedding." Rachel launched herself at me, nearly knocking me over with her hug. "Oh my God, Amber. Thank you, thank you, thank you." Even Mom and Dad looked impressed. "That's incredibly generous of you, honey," Mom said, actually sounding sincere for once. Later that evening, I told James about everything while we were having dinner in our kitchen. His response surprised me. "I have an idea," he said, putting down his fork. "What if we also get them tickets to the Maldives for their honeymoon? As a surprise gift at the wedding?" I stared at him, dumbfounded. "The Maldives? But that would cost..." "About $20,000, he finished. "I know. I'll use my personal savings." "I've been thinking about what you said, about building bridges with your family. Maybe this could help them see me differently." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. This was the man my family thought was cold and arrogant, offering to spend his own savings to give my sister her dream honeymoon. "Are you sure?" I asked, still stunned by his generosity. He smiled and pulled me into a hug. "Absolutely. But let's keep it a secret until the wedding. It'll make it more special." That night, as I lay in bed thinking about everything, I felt hopeful for the first time in ages. Maybe this would finally help my family see James for who he really was, not the antisocial person they'd labeled him as, but the incredibly thoughtful, generous man I'd fallen in love with. The months leading up to Rachel's wedding flew by in a whirlwind of planning and preparations. Every weekend seemed to bring a new decision to make, and Rachel wanted my opinion on everything. I was touched that she valued my input. "What do you think about this venue?" Rachel asked one Saturday, showing me pictures of an elegant converted warehouse. "It's smaller than the country club Mom suggested, but I think it has more character." "I love it," I said honestly. "Plus, it'll probably cost half as much." Rachel nodded, chewing her lip. "That's what I was thinking. Mark and I want to keep things simple, no more than 50 guests. We're both trying to be practical about money. I admired her approach. Unlike some brides who went crazy with expensive demands, Rachel was being surprisingly sensible. We spent hours comparing flower arrangements, tasting different menu options, and visiting dress shops, always with an eye on the budget. "You don't think it's too plain?" she asked, twirling in a sleek, minimalist wedding dress that cost a fraction of what Mom had expected her to spend. "It's perfect," I assured her. "Sometimes less is more." Every time we made another decision or checked another item off the list, I couldn't help but smile, thinking about the surprise waiting for them. James would occasionally ask how the planning was going, and I'd catch him grinning when I mentioned Rachel's offhand comments about wanting to travel someday. "I can't wait to see their faces," he said one evening. "Have you looked at the resort photos I sent you? The overwater bungalow is going to blow their minds." His enthusiasm made me fall in love with him all over again. Here was my antisocial husband, genuinely excited about giving my sister and her fiancé the honeymoon of their dreams. But as the wedding date grew closer, something started nagging at me. 2 weeks before the big day, I realized what it was: we still hadn't received our invitation. At first, I tried to brush it off. Rachel had been so busy with preparations, and she'd involved me in every detail of the planning. Surely it was just an oversight? Still, something felt off. James and I had our outfits ready, we'd arranged time off work, and we'd been actively involved in all the planning, but we didn't have an actual invitation. After a particularly restless night thinking about it, I decided to stop by my parents' house after work to ask Rachel directly. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw both my parents' cars and Rachel's beat-up Honda. Perfect, everyone would be there. I grabbed my purse and headed to the front door, still telling myself I was probably worried about nothing. After all, we'd been instrumental in planning this whole wedding. There had to be a simple explanation for the missing invitation. I walked into my parents' living room, trying to keep my voice casual. "Hey, Rachel, I wanted to ask you something. James and I haven't received our invitation yet. I'm sure it just got lost in the mail or something." Rachel shifted uncomfortably on the couch, glancing at our parents before answering. "Oh, actually, I wanted to give it to you in person." She reached into her purse and pulled out a cream-colored envelope, handing it to me with what I now recognize was forced enthusiasm. "Here you go." My hands were shaking slightly as I opened it. The invitation was beautiful, elegant script on thick paper, exactly the style we'd picked out together. But as I read the words, my stomach dropped. There was only one name on it, mine. "Rachel," I said slowly, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, "why isn't James's name on this?" She straightened up, and I saw something change in her expression. Gone was the hesitation, replaced by a defiant look I'd seen many times when we were kids, and she was about to do something she knew was wrong. "Well," she said, glancing at our parents again for support, "we decided to keep the guest list really tight. You know, only the absolute closest people." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Closest people? James is my husband. He's your brother-in-law." "Come on, Amber," Rachel said, rolling her eyes. "We all know he's not really family. He never tries to be part of anything." I turned to our parents, expecting, hoping, they would say something to correct this insanity. But Mom just sat there nodding, while Dad wouldn't even meet my eyes. "We support Rachel's decision," Mom said firmly. "Your husband doesn't enjoy these kinds of events anyway. He always looks so miserable at family gatherings." "That's not true," I protested, but Dad cut me off. "Be reasonable, Amber. He'll just sit there with that sad face of his the whole time, making everyone uncomfortable. Besides," he added, as if this was the clincher, "this way Rachel can save some money on the catering." "Save money?" I repeated incredulously. "You're talking about excluding my husband to save money on a plate of food?" "It's my wedding," Rachel said, crossing her arms. "I get to decide who comes, and I don't want him there bringing down the mood. He can stay home and code or whatever it is he does." I stood there, looking at these three people who I'd known my whole life, trying to understand how we'd gotten here. How could they sit there and so casually exclude my husband, act like he was some random acquaintance rather than family? The worst part was seeing how rehearsed it all seemed. They'd clearly discussed this before, prepared their arguments, agreed among themselves that this was perfectly reasonable. While my husband had been spending his savings on their dream honeymoon, they'd been plotting to exclude him. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "You want to exclude my husband to save money on the wedding that I gave you $10,000 for? $10,000 that I handed over without any conditions or expectations?" Rachel's smug expression faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered. "Well, that was different. You're my sister. And James is your brother-in-law." I cut her off. "But you know what's really ironic about all this? James has spent the last 3 months planning a surprise for you. He was going to give you and Mark an all-expenses-paid honeymoon trip to the Maldives. $20,000 worth of luxury resort, overwater bungalow, first-class flights, everything." The room went dead silent. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad's jaw dropped. Rachel's face went through a rapid series of expressions: disbelief, shock, and then something that made my stomach turn: calculation. "The Maldives?" Rachel's voice had completely changed, becoming sweet and conciliatory. "Oh my God, Amber, I was just kidding about the invitation thing. Of course James is invited. Here, let me fix the card right now." She reached for her purse, pulling out a pen. I stepped back, physically recoiling from her sudden change in attitude. "Don't bother. The trip is cancelled." "What? No." Rachel jumped up. "Come on, I said I was joking. Don't be so sensitive." "Honey," Mom stepped in, her voice honey-sweet, "your sister was just stressed about the wedding planning. You know how brides can be. Of course we want James there." Dad nodded vigorously. "Absolutely, he's family." I looked at their faces, faces I'd known and loved my whole life, and felt nothing but disgust. 5 minutes ago, they'd been united in excluding my husband. Now, at the mention of an expensive gift, they were falling all over themselves to backtrack. "You're right, Dad, he is family. Which is why I'm not going to let you treat him like this." I turned and walked toward the door, ignoring their protests. The drive home was a blur. When I walked through our front door, James took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. We sat on our couch as I told him everything: the invitation, their excuses, their sudden change of heart when they learned about the Maldives trip. James listened quietly, his face calm as always, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. He'd spent months planning this surprise, genuinely excited about giving Rachel and Mark this gift, and they couldn't even be bothered to invite him to the wedding. "What do you want to do?" he asked finally. "Cancel the trip," I said without hesitation. "And I'm not going to the wedding. I can't sit there and celebrate with people who treat you like this." "Are you sure? They're your family." I shook my head firmly. "You're my family. And I won't let anyone treat my family like this." James nodded, opened his laptop, and within minutes had cancelled the Maldives reservation. The money was immediately refunded to his account. As I watched the transaction complete, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. That evening, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. First came the calls, Rachel's name flashing on my screen every few minutes, alternating with Mom and Dad's. I silenced them all. Then the messages started flooding in. "Please don't do this to me," Rachel texted. "The Maldives has always been my dream." "Sweetheart, let's talk about this rationally," Mom wrote. "Don't make any hasty decisions about the trip. Think about your sister's happiness," Dad chimed in. "This is her special day." As I scrolled through their messages, something became crystal clear: not one of them mentioned James. Not one expressed regret for trying to exclude him from the wedding. Not one acknowledged how hurtful their actions had been. Every single message focused on one thing: the cancelled honeymoon. "You can't cancel the Maldives trip," Rachel's next message read. "We already told Mark's parents about it." I felt a cold laugh escape my throat. Of course they had. They'd probably started bragging about their luxury honeymoon the moment I left the house. The trip is already cancelled, I typed back. The money has been refunded. Don't contact me again. Then I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I blocked my sister's number. And my parents' numbers too, for good measure. James and I spent the rest of the evening watching movies on the couch, trying to pretend everything was normal. But the next morning, our peaceful Saturday was shattered by loud banging on our front door. Before we could even respond, the door burst open. My parents must have used their emergency key, the one I'd given them years ago for actual emergencies. Rachel stormed in first, followed by Mom and Dad. They didn't bother with hellos or explanations. "How dare you cancel our honeymoon?" Rachel screamed, her face red with anger. "You have to reinstate it right now." "Calm down," James said, standing up from the couch. "You can't just burst into our house like this." They ignored him completely, as if he wasn't even there. "Do you know how embarrassing this is?" Mom demanded. "After we already told everyone about the Maldives?" "Fix this right now," Dad ordered, pointing his finger at me. "Call whoever you need to call. We want the trip reinstated immediately." I stood my ground, my voice steady, despite my racing heart. "I'm not giving expensive gifts to people who don't respect my husband or me. The trip is cancelled, and that's final." Rachel's face contorted with rage. "You know what? Don't bother coming to my wedding at all. You're not invited anymore. I don't want you there." "Rachel," James started to say, but she cut him off. "Shut up, this is all your fault. Ever since Amber married you, she's changed. She used to be fun, she used to be normal." I took a deep breath, my voice coming out surprisingly steady. "You want to talk about money? Fine. Let's talk about the $10,000 I gave you for this wedding." Rachel's face went pale so quickly I thought she might faint. Mom and Dad stopped their angry muttering. "That's right," I continued. $10,000 that I could legally demand back right now, since you've uninvited me from the wedding. That's how gifts work, Rachel. They can be rescinded if the occasion they're meant for no longer applies to the gift giver. You wouldn't," Rachel stammered, her previous bravado completely gone. "No, I wouldn't," I agreed. "You can keep the money. Consider it your wedding gift from your horrible, unfun sister who doesn't want to come to your wedding anyway." "But the Maldives," Rachel's voice cracked. "The Maldives was never yours to begin with," I said firmly. "It was a surprise gift from the man you couldn't even be bothered to invite to your wedding. The man you've all treated like an outsider for years. Well, congratulations, you've finally succeeded in pushing us both away completely." Rachel's face crumpled, and she burst into tears. "But I've dreamed about the Maldives my whole life. It's not fair." Mom and Dad immediately wrapped their arms around her, like they always had when we were kids and she didn't get her way. They shot me venomous looks as they guided her toward the door. I watched them leave, coddling my sobbing sister between them, and felt nothing. No guilt, no sadness, just exhaustion. The door clicked shut behind them, and suddenly the house was quiet again. James came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. I leaned back against him, drawing strength from his steady presence. "I'm so tired," I whispered. "Tired of their arrogance, tired of them only thinking about themselves, tired of them treating us, like this." "I know," he said softly, kissing the top of my head. I turned to face him, a small smile forming on my lips, despite everything. "You know what? Let's do something with that refunded money. Something for us." "What did you have in mind?" "We've been talking about getting a new car. $20,000 would make a nice down payment." James grinned. "I might have been looking at some options already. Want to go car shopping?" 2 weeks later, we were driving home in our brand new hybrid SUV. It was beautiful, practical, and most importantly, it was ours, a symbol of our life together, our priorities, our future. As I ran my hand over the pristine dashboard, I couldn't help but feel we'd made the right choice. The day of Rachel's wedding came and went. I spent it deliberately busy. James and I took our new car for a long drive along the coast, had lunch at a quiet seaside restaurant, and tried our best not to think about what was happening back in town. But that evening, after we returned home, I couldn't help myself. I opened Instagram and went to Rachel's page. The wedding photos were already up, professionally shot, carefully filtered, perfectly posed. But as I scrolled through them, I noticed something. Rachel's smile never quite reached her eyes. In every photo, even the candid shots, she looked distracted, unsettled. Like someone trying too hard to prove they're having the time of their life. 2 days later, my Aunt Susan called. She'd always been my favorite relative, Mom's younger sister, but completely different from her in every way that mattered. "I need to tell you something about the wedding," she said, her voice serious. "Your mother made a speech. One of those passive-aggressive masterpieces she's so good at. She went on about how families should stick together, how some people become too caught up in their own lives to remember their responsibilities. Then she said something about greed destroying family bonds." I felt my chest tighten. Let me guess, everyone knew exactly who she was talking about. Oh, honey, it was about as subtle as a brick through a window. The whole room was uncomfortable. Even some of Mark's family were whispering, asking what was going on. I took a deep breath and told her everything, the uninvited husband, the Maldives trip, Rachel's tantrum, all of it. When I finished, there was a long pause on the line. "You did the right thing," she said finally, her voice firm. "I've watched for years as they've treated James like an outsider. It's not right, and it's not your fault. Your mother and Rachel, they've always been like this, always had to have everything their way." Tears welled up in my eyes. "Thank you, Aunt Susan. You don't know how much that means to me." After we hung up, I sat in our backyard for a long time, watching the sunset. James found me there and brought out 2 glasses of wine. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, settling into the chair beside me. "I was just thinking about family," I said, taking a sip. "About how sometimes the hardest decisions are the right ones. Do you think you'll ever reconcile with them?" "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe someday, if they can truly understand what they did wrong and make real changes. But I'm not holding my breath, and I'm not going to chase after them." James reached over and took my hand. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." I squeezed his hand back, thinking about how far we'd come. Sometimes it takes a crisis to show you what really matters, who really has your back. My family might have thought James was the outsider, the one who didn't fit in, but they were wrong. He was the one who had shown true family values, loyalty, respect, understanding. As we sat there in our backyard, watching the sky turn from orange to purple, to deep blue, I felt a profound sense of contentment. Our new car sat in the driveway, a symbol of our shared future. Our home, though quieter now without my family's constant drama, felt more peaceful than ever.